Your wife's laughter shouldn't make your blood run cold. But when crime boss Ethan Cole hears it echoing from his own bedroom, mixed with another man's voice, he knows this is more than an affair. A quiet housemaid pulls him into the shadows with 4 words that shatter his world. They're going to kill you. Tonight, the man who built an empire on fear discovers that betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the 2 people he trusted most. This is a story about poison, power, and the woman who saved a monster's life. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The December wind cut through downtown like a knife through silk, brutal and precise. Ethan Cole sat in the back of his black Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. His driver, Marcus, 20 years of loyal service, kept his eyes on the road and his mouth shut, which was exactly how Ethan preferred it. Ethan checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. He was supposed to be in Chicago until tomorrow afternoon, locked in negotiations with the Moretti family over distribution rights in the Eastern Corridor. 3 days of posturing and veiled threats, the kind of tedious power games that came with his line of work. But something had felt wrong since this morning, a nagging sensation in his gut, the kind that had kept him alive in a business where most men didn't see 40. He'd left Chicago 6 hours early. "Take the long way around," Ethan said, his voice low and even. Past Riverside, then through the old district. Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "Sir? Just do it." The Mercedes changed course, gliding through streets that grew progressively darker, more industrial. These were Ethan's streets, in every sense that mattered. The warehouses, the docks, the shipping companies with their meticulously clean ledgers hiding rivers of dirty money. He'd built this empire from nothing, starting as a teenager running numbers for men who were now dead or imprisoned. At 38, Ethan Cole controlled more of this city's underbelly than the mayor controlled its surface. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, his wife of 8 years. "Missing you. House feels empty without you. Come home safe. XO." He stared at the message, trying to feel something. Warmth, affection, anything. But there was only that sensation again, that wrongness spreading through his chest like frost. "Marcus, what's Victoria been doing this week?" The driver's shoulders tensed, barely perceptible. "Sir, I wouldn't know. I've been with you." "That's not what I asked." A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Marcus had been around long enough to know when Ethan wanted the truth versus the comfortable lie. "I've heard things," Marcus said finally. "Nothing concrete." "Tell me anyway." "Your cousin Lucas has been at the house, a lot. The staff mentioned it." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists on his lap. Lucas. His cousin, his right hand, the closest thing he had to a brother. Lucas, who he'd pulled up from nothing, who'd sworn loyalty in blood and meant it. Or so Ethan had believed. "How much is a lot?" "Every day you've been gone, sometimes staying until morning." The frost in Ethan's chest turned to ice. He looked out the window, watching his city slide past, all those lights hiding all those secrets. Everyone thought they knew him. Ethan Cole, the man you didn't cross, the name that made hardened criminals nervous. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know he'd been trying to leave. Not the business, not entirely. You didn't just walk away from an empire built on fear and violence. But he'd been planning to step back, to legitimize some operations, to maybe, and this was the part he'd barely admitted to himself, start a family. Victoria had been talking about children lately, maybe a son, maybe a daughter, maybe a chance at something normal, something clean. Maybe he'd been a fool. "Take me home," Ethan said quietly. "Now." The Mercedes surged forward, Marcus dropping the pretense of a leisurely route. They carved through traffic, the driver using every trick of navigation he'd learned in 20 years of ferrying dangerous men through dangerous streets. 15 minutes later, they turned onto Ashwood Lane, where the houses cost more than most people made in a lifetime, and sat behind gates that promised privacy and discretion. Ethan's house, a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, all clean lines and expensive understatement, sat at the end of the cul-de-sac. Every light seemed to be on, blazing against the winter dark. It looked alive. It looked wrong. "Sir?" Marcus pulled up to the gate, but didn't enter the code. Wait here. Keep the engine running. Ethan stepped out into the cold. He'd left his coat in Chicago, and the wind cut through his suit jacket like he wasn't wearing armor woven from reputation and violence. The gate responded to his fingerprint, sliding open with a whisper of expensive engineering. He walked up the driveway, each step measured and silent. In his world, you learn to move like a ghost when necessary. The front door was unlocked. Victoria never locked it when she was home, despite his repeated warnings. He slipped inside into warmth and light and the smell of vanilla candles she loved. Music drifted from upstairs. Something classical, piano and strings, Victoria's taste, and then laughter, high and bright and unmistakably hers, followed by a man's voice, low and intimate. Ethan stood in his own foyer in the house he'd bought, surrounded by furniture they'd chosen together, and felt something inside him crack. Not his heart. That particular organ had been armored long ago. But his sense of order, his carefully constructed world where loyalty mattered and blood meant something. That was breaking apart. He moved toward the stairs, each step silent on the marble floor. The voices grew clearer as he climbed. Victoria's bedroom. Their bedroom, technically, though he'd been sleeping in the guest room more often lately, coming home late from business and not wanting to disturb her. How considerate he'd been. How stupid. The door was cracked open, spilling light into the hallway. Ethan approached, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun he wore at the small of his back. Not because he planned to use it, just because habits formed in violence died hard. Telling you, he'll never know, Victoria's voice, breathy with laughter. Ethan's so wrapped up in his little empire he barely notices I exist. You're sure about the timeline? The man's voice was familiar, painfully familiar. Lucas. 2 weeks, Victoria said. Maybe 3. The insurance policy just cleared and I made sure everything's set up through the offshore accounts you suggested. Once it's done, we wait 6 months, then we're free. $20 million free. Ethan's hand tightened on his gun. He didn't draw it, didn't move, just stood there listening to his wife and his cousin plan his murder like they were discussing vacation plans. And you're certain about the method? Lucas again, sounding almost professional. Nothing traceable? Amara has access to everything. Once she adds it to his evening drink, it'll look like a heart attack. The man works himself to death, everyone knows it, no one will question it. Amara, the housemaid. Quiet, efficient. Amara, who'd worked for them for 3 years, who Victoria had insisted on hiring despite Ethan's preference for vetting his own staff. What about her? Lucas asked. After? I'll handle it. She'll get her money and disappear. No loose ends. Something moved in Ethan's peripheral vision. He turned his head slightly, hand still on his gun, and saw her. Amara herself, standing in the shadows of the hallway about 10 feet behind him. Their eyes met. She didn't scream, didn't run. Just stood there, this small woman in her housemaid uniform, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe. Or resignation. Then she lifted one finger to her lips, quiet, and gestured urgently toward the back stairs. Ethan had a choice. Burst through that door and end this now, with violence and rage and the tools he'd used his whole life. Or follow this woman who was apparently supposed to be his murderer into unknown territory. The voices from the bedroom continued, discussing logistics of his death with the casual efficiency of people ordering dinner. Ethan backed away from the door. He followed Amara. She moved quickly, silently, down the back staircase that led to the kitchen. Ethan kept his hand on his gun, his mind running through scenarios. Maybe this was the trap itself. Maybe she'd alert them, and he'd face both Victoria and Lucas together. But she didn't. She led him through the kitchen, out the side door, into the small courtyard garden that Victoria had insisted on installing. The December cold was sharp out here, but the high walls blocked the wind and the decorative trees provided shadows. Amara turned to face him, and Ethan finally got a good look at her. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back severely, olive skin. Eyes that had seen things, the kind of eyes you saw in veterans or people who'd survived trauma, not the eyes of a simple housemaid. I'm not going to kill you, she said quietly, her accent slight. Eastern European, maybe Romanian. I never was. Then what the hell is going on? They approached me 6 weeks ago. Mrs. Cole offered me $50,000 to poison you. She said it would be easy, that you trusted me, that no one would ever know. Amara's jaw tightened. I told her yes. Ethan's gun was halfway out before she raised her hands. I told her yes, Amar repeated, because I needed to know how far she'd go, how detailed the plan was. Who else was involved? She held his gaze. I've been documenting everything, Mr. Cole. Every conversation, every meeting, every transaction, because I know what you are, and I know what you're capable of. But I also know you've never been anything but fair to your staff. You pay well. You don't abuse. And you don't deserve to die choking on your own blood while the woman you married cashes in. Ethan stared at her, his mind trying to process this impossible turn. Why would you help me? Because my daughter is sick. Leukemia. She needs treatment that costs more than I'll make in 10 years. Amara's voice remained steady, but something flickered in her eyes. Mrs. Cole knew that. She used it. She told me this was my only chance to save my girl. So why not take her money? Because she's not going to pay me. Amara pulled out her phone, scrolled through messages, and held it up. After you die, I'm going to have an accident. She's already hired someone, a man named Dmitry Volkov. I know him from before, from my old life. He specializes in making problems disappear. Ethan took the phone, reading through the texts. There it was, laid out in careful detail. Victoria arranging a secondary murder, covering her tracks, eliminating witnesses. She'd thought of everything, almost everything. How long have you known? He asked. About your wife's plans? 6 weeks? About your cousin's involvement? 4 weeks? About the full scope? Amara took her phone back. 3 days ago, I hacked Mr. Russo's computer. Lucas has been planning this for almost a year. Lucas. His cousin, his brother, planning his death for a year. Ethan felt that cracks inside him widen. Show me everything. They went to Amara's quarters, a small apartment above the garage that Ethan had never actually visited. Inside it was sparse and clean, with photos of a young girl, maybe 10 years old, on every surface. The child had Amara's eyes but a brighter smile, captured in moments before cancer had probably dimmed that light. Amara's laptop sat on a small desk. She opened it, pulled up folders organized with military precision, and showed Ethan his own destruction, documented in meticulous detail. There were recordings, audio from hidden devices Amara had planted throughout the house, videos from the cameras in her phone positioned carefully during conversations, financial records showing the insurance policy Victoria had taken out 18 months ago, with premium payments traced back to offshore accounts that Lucas managed, text messages between Victoria and Lucas, growing progressively more intimate over the past 2 years. Their affair had started long before the murder plot. Maybe the affair had led to the murder plot. Maybe it had always been about money and convenience, and Ethan had just been the obstacle between them and happiness. Here, Amara said, pulling up another file. This is from last week. It was video footage from what looked like a restaurant, high-end and private. Victoria and Lucas sat in a booth, close enough to be lovers, discussing something intently. Amara had enhanced the audio. Can't wait much longer, Lucas was saying. Ethan's getting suspicious. I can feel it. He's been asking questions about shipments, about the books. If he digs too deep, he'll find the money I've been moving. Then we accelerate, Victoria replied. Amara says she can do it by Christmas. We'll have our holiday party, lots of witnesses, and Ethan will have his heart attack right there. Everyone will remember how stressed he's been, how hard he's working. No one will question it. And after? After you and I are on a beach in the Maldives, celebrating our newfound freedom. Victoria leaned in, kissed Lucas with the casual intimacy of long practice. 1 year from now, we'll be married, living off Ethan's money, running his empire, or what's left of it after we liquidate the messy parts. Ethan watched this, his face a mask, but his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage so pure it burned white hot. There's more, Amara said quietly, about what they plan to do with your business. Lucas has been in talks with the Moretti family. He's going to sell them your entire Eastern operation for $30 million. They've already drafted contracts. That explained why the Chicago meeting had felt wrong. The Morettis had been too agreeable, too accommodating. They'd been negotiating with a dead man, playing along while waiting for Lucas to deliver. Why are you showing me this? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. You could have just left, taken your daughter and disappeared. Because running doesn't work. Not from people like Victoria and Lucas. They'd find me. They'd find my daughter. Amara closed her laptop. And because you have resources I don't. You have power. You can make this right in ways I never could. What do you want? I want my daughter's treatment paid for. I want protection for both of us, somewhere Victoria and Lucas can never find us. And I want to watch them pay for what they've done. She met his eyes. Not just to you, to me. To everyone they've used. Ethan stood, pacing the small apartment, his mind racing through options and scenarios. He could kill them both tonight, walk back into that house, put bullets in their heads, and be done with it. His connections would ensure the police investigation went nowhere. Self-defense, crime of passion, any number of narratives could work. But that was simple. That was what they'd expect from him, the violent crime boss acting on rage and instinct. Ethan had built an empire by being smarter than his enemies, by thinking 3 moves ahead, by using the law as a weapon when violence was too blunt. The holiday party, he said slowly. It's in 2 weeks? December 23rd, 200 guests. All your business associates, your family, everyone who matters in your world. And Victoria wants to do it there in public, where everyone can witness my heart attack. Amara nodded. She thinks it makes her look more innocent, the grieving widow who watched her husband collapse. Very dramatic. A plan was forming in Ethan's mind, cold and precise. Not revenge. That was too emotional. This would be justice, served with the same meticulous attention to detail that Victoria and Lucas had applied to their betrayal. I need you to keep playing along, he said. Keep accepting their instructions. Keep them believing you're going to go through with it. And what will you do? I'm going to give them exactly what they want. Ethan smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I'm going to die at that party. Very publicly. Very convincingly. And then I'm going to watch my wife and cousin try to cash in on my death. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. This better be important, Cole. It's almost midnight. Detective Morrison, I need to meet with you. Tonight. And I need you to bring your FBI contacts. What the hell is going on? I'm about to hand you the biggest case of your career. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, organized crime connections. All gift-wrapped. Ethan glanced at Amara. And I'm going to need witness protection arrangements for a civilian and her daughter. There was a pause on the other end. Morrison was straight as cops came in this city. He'd been trying to build a case against Ethan for years, never quite getting enough evidence to stick. They had a strange relationship, mutual respect wrapped in professional antagonism. You're serious? Completely. How fast can you be at the old Riverside warehouse? 1 hour. But Cole, if this is some kind of... It's not. And Morrison, this might be the one time you and I want the same thing. Ethan hung up. He looked at Amara, who was watching him with that unreadable expression again. Your daughter's name? He asked. Elena. She's at City General in the pediatric oncology ward. She'll have the best care money can buy, starting tomorrow. Anonymous donor. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Amara? Thank you for not killing me. Thank you for not being the monster everyone says you are. Ethan left her apartment, stepped back out into the cold. The house still blazed with light. Victoria and Lucas probably still in that bedroom, still planning, still celebrating their cleverness. Let them celebrate. Let them think they'd won. In 2 weeks, at a party filled with witnesses, Ethan Cole would show them what real planning looked like. He walked back to where Marcus waited with the car, the engine still running. Change of plans, Ethan said, sliding into the back seat. We're going to the Riverside warehouse, and tomorrow you're going to start making calls. I need my inner circle, the people I trust absolutely. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them it's life or death. Is it? Marcus asked. It was. Now it's just business. The Mercedes pulled away from the house, from the lights and the laughter and the betrayal. Ethan looked back once, taking in the sight of his home, his life, everything he'd built. By the time that party came around, it would all look very different. The drive to Riverside took 20 minutes. The warehouse district was quiet this time of night. just security lights and the distant sound of ships on the water. Ethan's warehouse, technically owned by 3 shell companies that connected to 7 more legitimate businesses, sat at the end of a dead-end street, anonymous and unremarkable. Perfect for conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else. Morrison arrived 43 minutes later, driving an unmarked sedan with a woman in the passenger seat. She was late 40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a federal agent's idea of casual clothes. FBI, definitely. They met inside the warehouse, in a small office that Ethan kept for situations exactly like this. The space was clean, soundproofed, and equipped with enough security equipment to start a small surveillance company. "Talk," Morrison said, not bothering with pleasantries. The detective was built like a boxer gone slightly soft, with gray threading through his dark hair and cynical eyes that had seen too much. "And this better be good, Cole. I brought Special Agent Chen from the Bureau's Organized Crime Division." Chen nodded coolly. "Mr. Cole, your reputation precedes you." "I'm sure it does." Ethan gestured to chairs but remained standing himself. "Here's the situation. My wife and my cousin are planning to murder me for insurance money. They've contracted a housemaid to poison me at my holiday party in 2 weeks. After my death, they plan to liquidate parts of my business empire and disappear." He placed Amara's laptop on the desk, opened it, and started the first recording. For the next hour, Morrison and Chen listened to Victoria and Lucas plan murder. They watched video footage of illicit meetings. They reviewed financial records showing fraud and conspiracy. They saw text messages discussing Ethan's death with the casual indifference of people planning a vacation. By the end, Morrison was on his feet, pacing. Chen was making notes, her expression carefully neutral. "This is admissible?" Chen asked. "Most of it. The housemaid, Amara, recorded conversation she was party to. Legal in this state. The financial records I obtained through my own access to accounts I jointly control. Also legal. The video footage was taken in public spaces or with consent of one party." "You've been talking to lawyers." "I've been preparing." Ethan closed the laptop. "Here's what I'm proposing. I let the plan proceed. I die at the party, very publicly, with medical professionals who are part of your operation confirming my death. Victoria and Lucas try to claim the insurance money, which is when you arrest them. You get a clean case with multiple felonies, I get justice, and Amara gets protection." "You want us to fake your death," Morrison said slowly. "I want you to catch 2 people in the act of murder and fraud. The death is just theater." "And what's in it for you, really?" Chen asked. "Because I don't buy that this is just about justice." Ethan met her eyes. "My wife and cousin are also selling parts of my business to the Moretti crime family. That sale is contingent on my death. If you arrest them before the sale goes through, you damage the Moretti's expansion plan significantly. That should interest the FBI." Chen's expression shifted slightly. "How significantly?" "Enough that Marco Moretti would take 20 years to recover, maybe never. You'd effectively cripple one of the largest organized crime syndicates on the East Coast." "In exchange for what? Your freedom? Immunity?" "I don't need immunity. I haven't committed any crimes you can prove." Ethan smiled slightly. "I'm a legitimate businessman, Agent Chen. I own import companies, real estate firms, several restaurants. Sure, people whisper about my past, but that's all it is. Whispers and rumors." Morrison snorted. "You're full of shit, Cole." "Probably. But I'm also your best chance at taking down some actual criminals." "So what do you say, detective? Want to help me catch my wife and cousin, or would you rather spend another 5 years trying to build a case against me that'll never stick?" The 2 law enforcement officers exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of working in a world where right and wrong got blurry around the edges. "We need time to set this up properly," Chen said finally, "and we'll need the housemaid's full cooperation. Witness protection isn't simple. Amara will cooperate, and her daughter needs medical care, leukemia. I want that included in the deal. You're negotiating for your accomplice in your own murder plot. I'm negotiating for the woman who saved my life when she could have taken the money and run." Ethan moved toward the door. 2 weeks, Agent Chen. That's how long you have to get your operation ready. Because if Victoria and Lucas figure out I know, they'll disappear, and all this evidence I'm handing you will mean nothing. "We'll be in touch," Morrison said. "Cole? Why now?" You've been operating in the gray for years. Why suddenly play by the rules? Ethan thought about that question, about Victoria's laughter echoing from his bedroom, about Lucas, his blood, his brother, planning betrayal for a year, about coming home and finding his entire life was a carefully constructed lie. Maybe I'm tired, he said finally. Maybe I want to see if the law actually works when you give it everything it needs. Or maybe I just want to watch them realize they never knew who they were fucking with. He left the warehouse, left Morrison and Chen to their planning and their doubts. Marcus drove him to a hotel downtown, the Meridian, expensive and anonymous. Ethan checked in under a false name, went up to a suite, and stood at the window looking out over his city. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably still in his bed, maybe still with Lucas, both of them celebrating their cleverness, believing they'd planned the perfect murder, believing Ethan Cole was just another mark, just another obstacle between them and happiness. They had no idea. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Elena Cole's medical bills have been paid in full. Treatment starting tomorrow. Thank you. Ethan texted back, keep your head down. Keep them believing. 2 weeks. I know. Be careful, Mr. Cole. They're more dangerous than you think. So am I. He set the phone down and finally let himself feel it. The rage, the hurt, the bitter disappointment. Not because he'd loved Victoria, exactly. He wasn't sure he'd ever truly loved anyone. Not the way normal people did. But he'd trusted her. He'd trusted Lucas. And in his world, trust was the only currency that mattered. They'd counterfeit that currency. They'd traded on his trust while plotting his death. Now they'd learn what happened when you betrayed Ethan Cole. Not with violence, though. Not with the tools everyone expected him to use. No, he'd beat them with patience and precision. He'd let them think they'd won, right up until the moment everything collapsed around them. 2 weeks until the party. 14 days to prepare the perfect trap. Ethan Cole smiled in the darkness and started making calls. The next morning, he assembled his inner circle in a private room at one of his legitimate businesses, a restaurant called Marconi's, closed to the public but very much open for business of a different kind. There were 5 of them, sitting around a table, looking at their boss with varying degrees of concern. These were the people Ethan actually trusted, the ones who'd proven their loyalty through years of service and shared danger. Marcus, his driver. Sarah Chen, no relation to the FBI agent, his lawyer and the sharpest legal mind he'd ever encountered. James Wheeler, his head of security, ex-military and paranoid in all the right ways. David Santos, his accountant, who knew where every dollar lived and died. And Maria Torino, who ran his legitimate businesses and had been his mentor once, 20 years ago, when he'd been nothing but potential and rage. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on?" Maria said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs. She was 63, tough as steel, with gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. "You call an emergency meeting, you look like death, and you're not even living at your own house, so talk." Ethan told them everything about Victoria and Lucas, about the murder plot, about Amara and the evidence, and his deal with law enforcement. He showed them the recordings, the financial trails, all of it. By the end, the room was silent except for Maria's cigarette burning down. "Those motherfuckers," she said finally, with feeling. "Eloquent as always, Maria," Sarah murmured. She was studying her tablet, already pulling up legal code and precedents. "The law enforcement cooperation is smart. You're giving them what they want while protecting yourself. But Ethan, you understand this puts you in their crosshairs in a different way? Once this is over, they'll feel entitled to dig deeper into your operations. Let them dig. There's nothing to find that'll stick." "There's always something." But Sarah nodded. "Okay, if we're doing this, we need to do it perfectly. No mistakes, no improvisation. Wheeler, what do we need for security?" James Wheeler, a black man in his 40s with a scar running down his left cheek, leaned forward. "If we're faking your death at the party, we need complete control of the venue. Medical personnel who are in on it. Security sweeps for any recording devices Victoria or Lucas might have planted. And we need Ethan to actually appear to die, which means drugs, coordination with paramedics, the whole theatrical production." "The FBI will handle most of that," Ethan said. "But I want our own people embedded in the operation. Double redundancy. Triple check everything." "What about the business side?" David Santos asked. He was the youngest of the group, 32, with a mind that processed financial data like a computer. If Lucas has been moving money, we need to trace every transaction, make sure when this collapses, we can recover everything he's stolen. Already started. Ethan slid a folder across the table. Amara got me access to Lucas's private accounts. I need you to dig deeper, find all his hidey holes. When the FBI arrests him, I want every asset frozen, every escape route cut off. Consider it done. Maria stubbed out her cigarette and immediately lit another. And what about after? After your wife and cousin are arrested, after the trial, after all the dust settles? What then, Ethan? You're not actually dying, but your marriage is. Your trust in family is. What's left? That was the question, wasn't it? What remained after betrayal burned through your life like wildfire? I rebuild, Ethan said quietly. I clean house. I make damn sure no one ever gets close enough to hurt me again. That's a lonely way to live. It's a safe way to live. Maria shook her head but didn't argue. She'd known him since he was 18, angry and violent and brilliant. She'd taught him how to channel that anger into something more useful than street brawling. Maybe she'd always known he'd end up here, isolated at the top of an empire built on careful distance. All right, Sarah said, closing her tablet. We have 2 weeks. Here's how we play this. They spent the next 6 hours planning. Every detail, every contingency. The party would go forward as scheduled. Victoria would believe she was in control. Lucas would believe his plan was working. And then, in front of 200 witnesses, Ethan would drink the poisoned glass and die. Except he wouldn't die. He'd be administered a drug that would slow his heartbeat to almost nothing, make him appear dead to casual observation. The paramedics, FBI agents, would rush him away. Victoria and Lucas would comfort each other, play their roles as grieving family. And then the trap would spring shut. One more thing, Ethan said as the meeting was wrapping up. Lucas has a meeting with the Morettis scheduled for December 26th, 3 days after the party. That's when he plans to finalize the sale of my Eastern operations. So we make sure he's in federal custody before then, Wheeler said. No. Ethan smiled slightly. We let the meeting happen. We let him show up, ready to sell assets he doesn't own, only to find out I'm alive and the FBI has everything documented. I want Marco Moretti to know Lucas tried to fuck him over. I want that bridge burned to ash. Maria laughed, sharp and bitter. Now that's the Ethan Cole I remember. Not content with winning, you've got to salt the earth. He deserves nothing less. They dispersed after that, each person carrying their piece of the plan. Ethan stayed in the restaurant's back office, making more calls, setting more pieces in motion. This wasn't just about justice or revenge. This was about sending a message to everyone in his world. Betray Ethan Cole, and you didn't just lose. You lost everything, publicly and irreversibly. His phone rang. Unknown number again, but he recognized the pattern. Amara using a burner. Talk, he said. They moved up the timeline. Her voice was tight with stress. Mrs. Cole just told me tonight. The party, December 23rd. She wants you dead by midnight. That's still 2 weeks away. No, tonight is December 9th. The party is in 14 days, but she wants me to do a test run. Amara's breath caught. Tonight, she wants me to put a small dose in your evening drink. Not enough to kill you, just enough to make you feel sick. She said it'll make the final dose less suspicious. Ethan stood, his mind racing. Where are you now? In my apartment. She's in the house with Lucas. They're planning something, I can tell. They keep talking about timing and windows and opportunities. Mr. Cole, I think they might be moving the whole plan up. Can you stall? I already told her I need to be careful with dosing, but she's getting impatient. She said if I can't do this, she'll find someone who can. Damn it, Victoria was smart. He'd always known that. Smart enough to sense when things weren't quite right, when the game had shifted somehow. Maybe she'd noticed Ethan's early return from Chicago. Maybe she'd picked up on some micro-expression from Amara. Or maybe she was just paranoid the way criminals got when success was so close. Okay, here's what you do. Make the drink. Do exactly what she asks. But water it down, add something that'll make me feel off but won't actually hurt me. I'll play sick tomorrow. Stay home. That'll buy us time. Are you sure? I'm sure. Amara, you've come this far. Don't lose your nerve now. I'm not losing anything. I'm terrified I'm going to lose my daughter if this goes wrong. It won't go wrong, trust me. I don't trust anyone, Mr. Cole, but I'm betting my daughter's life on you, which might be worse. She hung up. Ethan stood there, phone in hand, feeling the weight of that responsibility. A little girl in a hospital bed, sick with cancer, whose life now depended on him executing this plan perfectly. No pressure. He called Morrison. "We might have a problem." Morrison's voice crackled through the phone line, sharp with irritation. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Victoria's getting nervous and might move everything up. She's testing Amara tonight with a smaller dose." Ethan paced the office, his free hand clenched into a fist. "If we spook her now, she'll bolt or change the plan entirely." "So you're going to let yourself get poisoned?" "A little bit. Controlled exposure. Enough to sell it." "Jesus Christ, Cole," Morrison exhaled heavily. "You're either the smartest bastard I've ever met or the dumbest. I can't figure out which. Let me know when you decide. In the meantime, I need Agent Chen to get her medical team ready earlier than planned. If Victoria accelerates to next week instead of the party, we need to pivot fast. I'll make the call. But Cole, be careful. People like your wife, when they smell blood in the water, they don't always wait for the perfect moment. They strike." Ethan ended the call and checked his watch. 8:43 p.m. In a normal life, he'd be heading home right now, walking through that front door into warmth and light and the illusion of love. Instead, he was planning how to fake being poisoned convincingly enough to fool a woman who wanted him dead. His phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "She's watching me. I have to do it soon. Do it. I'll be ready." Ethan left Marconi's through the back entrance, where Marcus waited with the car. The drive back to Ashwood Lane felt longer than it should have. Every minute stretched thin with anticipation. He was walking into his own murder attempt, relying on a housemaid he barely knew to not actually kill him. The stakes had never been higher, and somehow that made everything clearer. "Sir," Marcus said as they pulled up to the gate, "are you absolutely certain about this?" "No, but we're doing it anyway." The house looked different now that Ethan knew what was hiding behind all that light and glass. It looked like a trap, beautiful and expensive and deadly. He walked in through the front door, and Victoria appeared almost immediately from the living room, her face arranged in an expression of delighted surprise. "Ethan, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Chicago wrapped up early?" She was beautiful, his wife. Blonde hair that cost a fortune to maintain, perfect skin, a body kept trim through personal training and careful diet. She wore casual clothes that probably cost more than Amara made in a month. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, bare feet with painted toenails. The picture of domestic comfort, the picture of a woman plotting murder. "Business concluded faster than expected," Ethan said, letting his exhaustion show. It wasn't hard. He was exhausted, bone-deep tired in ways that had nothing to do with travel. "Where's Lucas?" "Oh, he stopped by earlier to drop off some contracts you needed to review. He left about an hour ago." Victoria moved closer, rose on her toes to kiss his cheek. Her perfume was familiar, something French and expensive. "You look tired, honey. Why don't you go upstairs and change? I'll have Amara bring you a drink." There it was, the setup, delivered with such casual sweetness that anyone else would have missed it entirely. "That sounds perfect," Ethan said. "Scotch, neat, you know how I like it." "Of course I do." Victoria smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who believed she'd already won. "I'll tell her right away." Ethan climbed the stairs to their bedroom, his hand trailing along the banister, feeling the smooth wood beneath his fingers. How many times had he walked up these stairs thinking about business, about expansion, about the next move in some endless game of power? Never once thinking the real threat was sleeping beside him every night. The bedroom was exactly as he remembered. King-sized bed with its white linens, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. Their wedding photos sat on Victoria's nightstand, both of them smiling in that moment 8 years ago when promises had seemed solid and forever had felt possible. He wondered if she'd ever loved him, even a little, or if it had always been about the money, the lifestyle, the opportunity. His phone vibrated. A text from Amara. 2 minutes. Ethan changed into comfortable clothes, the kind he usually wore at home when he wasn't putting on the armor of expensive suits. Sweatpants, a t-shirt, bare feet. He looked almost vulnerable like this, which was exactly the point. Let Victoria see him relaxed and unsuspecting. A soft knock at the door. "Mr. Cole?" "Come in, Amara." She entered carrying a crystal tumbler on a small silver tray. The scotch was his preferred brand, Macallan 25, amber liquid that caught the light. Everything looked normal, perfect, exactly as it should be, except for the slight tremor in Amara's hands. "Your drink, sir." She set the tray on his dresser, her eyes meeting his for just a fraction of a second. In that look, he saw fear and determination and something else. An apology, maybe, for what she was about to do, even though both of them knew it was necessary. "Thank you, Amara. How's your daughter?" The question clearly surprised her. Her professional mask slipped for just a moment. The new treatment is helping. Thank you for asking." "Good. That's good." Ethan picked up the glass, studying it. The scotch looked untainted, perfectly normal. Whatever she'd added was invisible, tasteless probably, designed to slip past every defense. "You can go." She left quickly, closing the door behind her. Ethan stood there with the poisoned drink in his hand, feeling the weight of the glass, the warmth of the liquid inside. He'd killed men before, not directly, not often, but he'd given orders that ended lives. Now someone was trying to do the same to him, and the weapon was this amber liquid that smelled like oak and peat and money. He raised the glass to his lips and drank. The scotch tasted exactly as it should, smooth, complex, with that distinctive Macallan finish. No bitterness, no chemical aftertaste. Whatever Amara had used was professional grade, the kind of poison that left no trace except a body. Ethan finished half the glass and set it down. Then he waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. He started to wonder if maybe Amara had chickened out, had given him regular scotch, and was now frantically trying to figure out how to explain that to Victoria. Then the first wave hit. Nausea, sudden and overwhelming. His skin flushed hot, then cold. His heartbeat became irregular, skipping beats, racing, then slowing to a crawl. Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed because standing suddenly seemed like a bad idea, and the room was starting to tilt in ways that rooms shouldn't tilt. Not good. This was supposed to be mild, a test dose, but his body was reacting hard. He reached for his phone, but his fingers weren't working right. The device slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Ethan tried to stand, made it 2 steps toward the door, and then his legs gave out entirely. He hit the floor hard, the impact jarring through his bones. His vision was blurring now, darkness creeping in from the edges. This was wrong. This was very wrong. Either Amara had miscalculated the dose, or Victoria had changed the instructions, or... The bedroom door opened. Footsteps, quick and light. Victoria's voice, but different now, stripped of its warm honey tone. "Well, that was faster than expected." She crouched down next to him, her face swimming in and out of focus. "Ethan, can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me." He managed to blink, barely. "Good. I want you to understand what's happening. I changed the dosage. This isn't a test anymore. This is the real thing." Victoria's smile was cold now, all pretense gone. "I couldn't risk waiting until the party. You've been acting strange since you got back from Chicago. I think you suspected something, so we're doing this now, tonight, just you and me." Ethan tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick, useless. "Don't bother. The paralytic is already working. Your lungs will stop in about 3 minutes. It'll look like a heart attack, just like we planned. The coroner won't find anything unusual." She stood up, brushing off her knees. "I wish I could say I'm sorry, but honestly, I stopped caring about you 2 years ago. Maybe I never cared at all. You were just convenient, rich, powerful, and now worth more dead than alive." She pulled out her phone, started typing, probably texting Lucas, Ethan realized through the fog in his brain, telling him it was done, that the waiting was over. His vision was fading fast. His chest felt tight, each breath harder than the last. This was it. This was how Ethan Cole died. Not in a hail of bullets like he'd always imagined, not in some dramatic confrontation, but on his bedroom floor, paralyzed and helpless, while his wife watched him suffocate. Then another voice, sharp and urgent. "Get away from him." Amara rushed into the room, carrying something in her hand, a syringe. She shoved Victoria aside and dropped to her knees next to Ethan, her fingers frantically searching for a vein in his arm. "What the hell are you doing?" Victoria grabbed Amara's shoulder, trying to pull her back. "Get away from him." You changed the dose. Amar's voice was raw with panic. You stupid woman. You gave him 10 times what I prepared. You're killing him for real. That was the point. The point was to make it look natural. This will show up in the autopsy. They'll know it was poison. Amara found the vein, jabbed the needle in, pressed the plunger. The whole plan falls apart if they suspect murder. Whatever she injected burned through Ethan's system like fire. His heart, which had been slowing to nothing, suddenly kicked back into rhythm, painful, irregular, but working. Air rushed into his lungs, blessed and burning. Victoria stared at them both, her perfect face twisted with rage and confusion. What did you just do? I saved him. And I saved your stupid plan. Amara stood up, the empty syringe still in her hand. If he died like that, they'd have done a full toxicology screen. They'd have found everything. You'd be in prison before his body was cold. I didn't think. No, you didn't think. You got impatient and reckless, and you almost ruined everything. Amara was acting now, Ethan realized dimly. Playing a role, pretending to be the loyal accomplice, frustrated with Victoria's incompetence. He needs to die at the party, in public, with witnesses who all believe it's natural causes. Not alone in his bedroom, with enough poison in him to kill 3 men. Victoria's face cycled through emotions, anger, fear, suspicion. How do I know you didn't just antidote him on purpose? How do I know you're not playing me? Because I need your money to save my daughter, you paranoid bitch? Amara's voice cracked. Because if this plan fails, Elena dies. So yes, I saved him, but only so we can kill him properly in 2 weeks like we planned. The 2 women stared at each other, and Ethan watched from the floor, still barely able to move, his body shaking with the after effects of poison and antidote. This was the moment. Either Victoria would believe Amar's performance, or she'd realize this was all a setup. Finally, Victoria stepped back. Fine, 2 weeks. But if you try anything, I won't. I can't. You have all the leverage. Amara looked down at Ethan, her face a careful mask. Help me get him to bed. He'll be sick for a few days from this, which actually works in our favor. Everyone will remember he wasn't feeling well before the party. They lifted him between them, his wife and his unlikely ally, and deposited him on the bed. Ethan's body was still rebelling, muscles twitching, nerves firing randomly. He felt Victoria's hand on his forehead, checking for fever, and had to fight the urge to pull away from her touch. I'll stay with him tonight, Victoria said. Make sure he doesn't aspirate or anything. I'll check in every hour. Amara moved toward the door, then paused. Mrs. Cole? Don't improvise again, please. We're so close to getting everything we want. After she left, Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Frustration, maybe, or disappointment that he was still alive. You're going to be okay, she said softly, brushing hair back from his forehead. The gesture was tender, practiced, completely meaningless. Just a bad reaction to something you ate, that's all. We'll take care of you. She was building her narrative already, Ethan realized, establishing the pattern of him being unwell, setting up the foundation for his heart attack at the party. Every action calculated, every word a brick in the wall of her alibi. His phone was still on the floor where he'd dropped it. Close enough to see the screen light up with an incoming call, Morrison's number. Victoria saw it too. Detective Morrison? Why is he calling you? Her voice sharpened with suspicion. Ethan managed to croak out a few words. Business? Pending investigation? Told him? Call any time. It was barely coherent, but Victoria seemed to accept it. She declined the call and set the phone on the nightstand out of his reach. You need to rest. We'll talk in the morning. She left the room, closing the door behind her. Ethan lay there in the darkness, his body slowly coming back under his control, his mind racing despite the drugs still coursing through his system. That had been too close. Victoria's impatience had nearly killed him for real, and only Amara's quick thinking had saved him. But now Victoria was suspicious, watching more carefully. They'd have to be perfect from here on out. His bedroom door opened again, quietly. Amara slipped in, closed it behind her, and came to sit on the edge of the bed. She's downstairs calling Lucas, Amara whispered. I have maybe 3 minutes. Are you okay? Been better. Ethan's voice was rough but functional. What the hell was in that syringe? Adrenaline mostly, plus some other things to counteract the paralytic. It won't show up in any standard tox screen. She pulled out her phone, checking something. Mr. Cole, we have a problem. Victoria changed her timeline because Lucas pushed her to. He's getting nervous about something. I think maybe the Morettis are pressuring him to close the deal faster. Can you still make it to the party? Maybe. But she's going to be watching me constantly now. I bought us time with that performance, but she's smart. If she thinks too hard about what happened tonight, she might realize I shouldn't have had an antidote ready. Amara's hands were shaking again. We might need to move the whole plan up. Do it this week instead of waiting. No. Ethan forced himself to sit up, though his body protested every movement. We stick to the party. Public venue, lots of witnesses. That's what makes this work. You almost died tonight. But I didn't. Thanks to you. He met her eyes. How's Elena? Better. The new treatment is... She smiled today. First time in weeks. Amar's voice caught. I can't let that go. I can't risk losing the money for her care. You won't. I promised you protection and payment, and I keep my promises. Ethan stood carefully, testing his balance. Still shaky, but improving. Go back downstairs. Act normal. Keep Victoria thinking she's in control. And you? I'm going to be convincingly sick for the next few days. Give everyone a reason to believe I'm having heart problems. He managed a thin smile. Method acting. Amara left and Ethan stood at his bedroom window looking out at the garden below. The winter night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. He used to stand here and feel like he owned the world. Now he just felt tired. His phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. Chen says you didn't answer. Status check? Alive, barely. Victoria moved up the attempt. Amara had to antidote me. What a long story. Plans still on track for the party. But we need to be ready to move faster if she gets impatient again. Cole, maybe we should just arrest them now. This is getting too dangerous. No, I want them at the party in front of everyone. I want the whole world to see them for what they are. Your funeral, hopefully not. The next morning, Ethan called in sick to all his appointments. Marcus spread the word through his organization that the boss wasn't feeling well, probably just stress and exhaustion, but taking a few days to recover. The story rippled out through his network, reaching all the right ears, including Lucas, who showed up at the house around noon with a concerned expression and a bottle of expensive wine. Ethan, man, I heard you were under the weather. Thought I'd check in. Lucas looked genuinely worried, which was impressive. The man had missed his calling as an actor. You look like hell. Feel worse. Ethan was in the living room, wrapped in a blanket despite the house being warm, playing up the sick angle, letting his cousin see vulnerability. Something I ate in Chicago, maybe, or just working too hard. You definitely worked too hard. Lucas sat down in the chair across from him. You know, you should think about stepping back a bit. Let other people handle more of the day-to-day operations. Delegate. Are you offering to take on more? If it helps you stay healthy, absolutely. Lucas leaned forward, his expression earnest. You've built something incredible, Ethan. But what's the point if it kills you? The irony was so thick Ethan could taste it. Here was his cousin, his partner, the man planning to murder him, suggesting he might die from overwork. The setup was almost elegant in its hypocrisy. Maybe you're right, Ethan said slowly. Maybe after the holidays I'll look at restructuring things, taking some time off. That's good. That's really good. Lucas smiled, and for just a second something flickered behind his eyes. Guilt? Relief? Anticipation? You deserve a break. Victoria deserves to have you around more. You two should take a vacation or something. Yeah, maybe we will. They talked for another 20 minutes, Lucas asking careful questions about Ethan's health, his business plans, his thoughts on the upcoming party, fishing for information, trying to gauge whether Ethan suspected anything. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and Ethan played along, giving answers that were just honest enough to seem real while revealing nothing useful. After Lucas left, Victoria came into the living room with tea she'd made herself. Another performance of concern, another brick in her alibi. He's worried about you, she said, sitting next to him on the couch. We all are. I'm fine, just need rest. The party's in less than 2 weeks. If you're not feeling better by then, we should cancel. We're not canceling. That party is important for business. All my partners will be there, people I need to maintain relationships with. Ethan sipped the tea, which was genuinely just tea this time. I'll be fine by then. If you're sure. I'm sure. Victoria nodded, but her eyes were calculating. She was thinking about timelines and opportunities and how to salvage her plan if Ethan actually recovered from this manufactured illness. The wheels were turning behind that beautiful face, trying to figure out the next move. Ethan spent the next week playing his role perfectly. He worked from home, took meetings via video call, appeared gradually healthier but not completely recovered. Everyone in his organization saw him struggling, saw Victoria being attentive and caring, saw Lucas stepping up to handle more responsibilities. The stage was being set, piece by piece. On December 18th, 5 days before the party, Ethan met with Morrison and Agent Chen in a different warehouse, this one across town. The space was cold and smelled like old machinery, but it was secure. Your wife tried to kill you a week ago, and you're still going through with this? Chen looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. Cole, we can arrest them now. We have enough evidence. You have evidence of conspiracy, but the moment they know we're on to them, their lawyers will start building defenses. They'll claim it was all talk, fantasy, that they never intended to go through with it. Ethan pulled up photos on his tablet, showing the party venue. But if they do it in public, if Victoria hands me that drink with poison in it in front of 200 witnesses, there's no defense. Intent becomes action. And if something goes wrong? Morrison asked. If your housemaid doesn't get the timing right, or if Victoria uses a different poison than expected, then I die and you get them for murder 1 instead of attempted. Either way, they lose. That's not funny. It's not meant to be. Ethan met their eyes. Look, I know this is unorthodox. I know it's dangerous, but I need this to be public, complete, undeniable. Not just for the legal case, but for my business. Everyone in my world needs to see what happens when you betray me. Chen and Morrison exchanged looks. The detective sighed. All right, we'll have medical personnel standing by, FBI agents embedded in your catering staff and security. The moment you drink whatever she gives you, we move fast. You'll be transported to a secure hospital facility where we can monitor you properly. And Amara? Already in protective custody as of this morning. Her daughter too. They're at a safe house under guard. Chen pulled up files on her own tablet. We've also frozen some preliminary accounts based on the evidence you provided. Just paper trails that won't alert Victoria or Lucas yet, but enough to make sure they can't move money once this goes down. Good. What about the Moretti meeting? We have surveillance approved for December 26th. We'll record everything Lucas tries to sell them. Add racketeering and fraud to his charges. Morrison actually smiled slightly. You've handed us a hell of a case, Cole. Might actually get me promoted. Happy to help law enforcement, Ethan said dryly. He left the warehouse as evening was settling over the city, the winter sky dark and heavy with clouds. Snow was predicted for the party date, which felt appropriate. Let everything be cold and white and clean when Victoria's world came crashing down. Marcus drove him back to the house, where lights blazed in every window. There was activity inside. Caterers doing a walkthrough for the party, decorators measuring spaces for flower arrangements. Victoria was in her element, planning the perfect event down to the last detail, planning Ethan's murder with the same meticulous care she applied to seating charts and menu selections. He found her in the dining room, reviewing table placements with the event coordinator. She looked up when he entered, her face brightening with that practiced smile. Ethan, you're just in time. Come look at this setup. I think the circular tables work better for conversation flow, but what do you think? He looked at the elaborate plan spread across the table. 200 guests, seated dinner, live music, everything elegant and expensive and perfect. The kind of party people would remember, for all the wrong reasons. It's beautiful, he said. You've done an amazing job. Only the best for you. Victoria came around the table, put her arms around him. Her body fit against his the way it had for 8 years, familiar and comfortable and completely hollow. This is going to be a night no one forgets. No, Ethan said quietly, his arms hanging at his sides, not returning her embrace. It won't be. She pulled back slightly, searching his face. Are you okay? You seem distant. Just tired. This last week has been rough. Well, 5 more days and then you can relax at the party. Enjoy yourself. Celebrate. Her hand slid down his arms, squeezed gently. Everything's going to be perfect, Ethan. I promise. He looked into her eyes, blue, clear, beautiful, and saw absolutely nothing behind them. No love, no regret, just calculation and anticipation. I'm sure it will be, he said. That night, alone in the guest bedroom where he'd been sleeping since getting sick, Ethan sat at the window and watched snow begin to fall. Light flurries at first, then heavier, covering the garden in white. His phone showed messages from his team, Sarah confirming legal documents, David tracing the last of Lucas's hidden accounts, Wheeler coordinating security with the FBI, Maria checking in with her usual gruff concern. Everything was in place. The trap was set. In 5 days, Victoria would hand him poison in front of everyone who mattered in his world. She'd watch him die, or think she was watching him die, and then her carefully constructed plan would collapse around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. Ethan should have felt triumphant. He should have felt powerful. Instead, he just felt empty. Because when this was over, when Victoria and Lucas were in handcuffs and his revenge was complete, what would he have left? An empire built on fear. A house full of memories that were all lies, money and power and absolutely no one to trust. Maybe that's what he deserved. Maybe this was always how it was going to end. The snow fell harder, covering everything in white silence, and Ethan Cole waited for the party where he would die and be reborn and lose everything that had ever mattered to him. 5 more days. The morning of December 23rd arrived with brittle sunshine that made the previous night's snow gleam like broken glass. Ethan stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked the part, tired, slightly gaunt from his supposed illness, but recovering. The kind of man who was pushing himself to attend an important party despite not being at full strength. Perfect victim material. His phone buzzed with a text from Wheeler. All FBI personnel in position. Medical team standing by in catering van. We're ready when you are? Ethan didn't respond. He just set the phone down and finished getting dressed, moving through the motions with mechanical precision. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie yet. He'd add that later, closer to party time. For now, he needed to look like a man preparing for an evening, not a funeral. Victoria knocked on the bathroom door, then opened it without waiting for an answer. She was already dressed, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost $5,000. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman ready to celebrate, or mourn, depending on how you looked at it. The caterers are here, she said, and the florist is setting up in the main room. It's all coming together beautifully. Good. Ethan adjusted his collar, not looking at her directly. You've worked hard on this. We both have. This party represents everything we've built together. She moved closer, put a hand on his shoulder. 8 years, Ethan. We should be proud. He finally met her eyes in the mirror. Are you proud, Victoria? Of course. Aren't you? I don't know what I am anymore. She studied him for a long moment, and he saw calculation flash across her face. You're not getting sentimental on me, are you? That's not like you. Maybe I'm just getting old. You're 38, that's not old. Victoria squeezed his shoulder, then let go. Come downstairs when you're ready. I want you to approve the bar setup. After she left, Ethan stood there for another minute, trying to remember what it had felt like in the beginning. When he'd met Victoria at some charity function 6 years before they married, when she'd been charming and interested and had seemed to genuinely care about something other than his bank account. Had that version of her ever been real, or had it always been performance, calculation, the long con of a woman who saw opportunity and took it? He'd never know. And maybe that was the worst part. Downstairs, the house had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, elegant table settings, soft lighting that made everything look like a magazine spread. Staff moved through rooms with practiced efficiency, setting up bars and food stations and checking equipment. Some of them were real caterers. Others were FBI agents in catering uniforms, armed and ready. Ethan spotted them easily, the way they moved, the way their eyes tracked exits and entry points. Anyone from his world would spot them too, which meant he needed to sell this hard. Act like everything was normal, like this was just another party. Lucas arrived around noon, dressed casually but expensive. He found Ethan in the study, going over some last-minute business reports that meant nothing. Big night, Lucas said, settling into a chair uninvited. You ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. You know, I've been thinking. Lucas leaned back, casual and comfortable. After tonight, after the holidays, maybe we should talk about restructuring some operations. I've got some ideas that could really expand our reach. Like selling my eastern corridor to the Morettis? The words came out before Ethan could stop them. Lucas's face went blank for just a second, then recovered with a confused smile. What? Where did that come from? Nowhere. Just heard some rumors. Ethan kept his voice light, dismissive. You know how people talk in this business. Yeah, people talk a lot of bullshit. But Lucas's jaw was tight now, his eyes harder. The Morettis have been sniffing around, sure. Everyone knows that. But I'd never make a deal like that without talking to you first. Of course not. You're family. Exactly. Family. Lucas stood, moved to the window. You feeling okay, man? You seem off. Just the stress of hosting 200 people when I've been sick all week. Right. Well, it'll be over soon. Then you can relax. Lucas turned back, his expression friendly again, but something lurking underneath. We should get a drink later, just us. Talk about some things. Sure, after the party. Lucas left, and Ethan sat there feeling the walls close in. That had been stupid, showing his hand even slightly. But part of him had wanted to see Lucas's reaction, wanted to watch his cousin scramble to cover tracks that were already exposed. His phone buzzed. Morrison. What the hell was that? We're monitoring the room. You almost tipped him off. I know. Won't happen again. It better not. We're too close to blow this now. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. More preparations, more staff arriving, Victoria fluttering around making sure every detail was perfect. She'd hired a pianist for background music, arranged for ice sculptures, even had someone come in to adjust the lighting in every room to create the right ambiance, the perfect setting for murder. Around 4 p.m., guests started arriving early, the truly important ones, the people who rated special access. Ethan put on his public face and played host, shaking hands and accepting congratulations on his recovery and making small talk about business and weather and nothing that mattered. Marco Moretti showed up at 4:30, a bull of a man in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes. He brought his son Anthony and 2 bodyguards who weren't allowed past the front entrance. Wheeler had made sure of that. No outside security except what Ethan's people and the FBI provided. Ethan? Marco's handshake was firm, calculated to show strength without being aggressive. Good to see you looking better. Heard you were under the weather. Nothing serious, just needed rest. That's good. That's very good. Marco's eyes were assessing, taking in the house, the setup, Ethan himself. Beautiful party. Your wife has excellent taste. She does. You're a lucky man. Marco smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Lucky in business, lucky in marriage. Some men have all the advantages. There was weight behind those words, layers of meaning. Marco was fishing, trying to gauge whether Ethan knew about Lucas's planned betrayal, trying to figure out if tonight's party was actually a trap. Smart man. Too bad he'd walked into it anyway. Luck runs out eventually, Ethan said quietly. For everyone. True enough. Marco clapped him on the shoulder. Enjoy your evening, Ethan. I have a feeling it's going to be memorable. More guests arrived as the sun set. The house filled with voices and laughter and the clink of glasses. Ethan moved through it all like a ghost, present but disconnected, watching everyone play their roles. Victoria was radiant, working the room, the perfect hostess. Lucas was charming, telling stories, making people laugh. They were both so good at this, at pretending to be something they weren't. But then, so was Ethan. By 7 p.m., the party was in full swing. 200 people filled the house, spilling from room to room, drinks in hand, conversations flowing. The pianist played something classical and elegant. The food was exceptional. Everything was perfect. Ethan found himself in the main room, surrounded by business associates and allies and people who smiled at him while probably plotting their own betrayals. That's how this world worked. Everyone was always looking for an angle, an advantage, a way to climb higher by stepping on someone else. He'd built an empire in this world. Now he was going to burn part of it down. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria's voice cut through the ambient noise. She was standing near the piano, holding a glass of champagne, looking like something out of a movie. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. She smiled, gracious and warm. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This party means so much to us, not just as a holiday celebration, but as a reminder of everything we've built together as a family and a community. She looked at Ethan, her expression tender. Especially I want to thank my husband, who pushed himself to be here tonight despite not feeling his best. That's the kind of man Ethan is, dedicated, strong, always putting others first. Applause rippled through the room. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat, but kept his face neutral, accepting the recognition with a slight nod. So let's raise our glasses, Victoria continued, to health, to prosperity, to the future. To all of us. To all of us, the room echoed, and everyone drank. Victoria made her way through the crowd toward Ethan, still holding her champagne, her smile never wavering. When she reached him, she leaned in close. There's a special bottle of Macallan in the study, she whispered. The 30-year. I had it brought up from the cellar just for you. Why don't you go have a glass? You've earned it. This was it. The moment. The culmination of weeks of planning and betrayal. That sounds perfect, Ethan said. He excused himself from the conversation he'd been pretending to follow and made his way toward the study. The route took him through the main hallway, past clusters of guests, past Lucas, who was deep in conversation with Marco Moretti. Their eyes met briefly, and Lucas gave him a small nod. Did his cousin know? Was Lucas in on the exact timing, or had Victoria kept that detail to herself? The study was empty when Ethan entered, but a crystal decanter sat on his desk with a single glass beside it. The amber liquid caught the light, beautiful and deadly. He could see from here that it had been poured recently. No dust, no settling, fresh and ready. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, read Morrison's text. Medical team is mobile. Say the word, and we move. Ethan looked at the glass of poisoned scotch, looked at his phone, looked at the door where, beyond it, 200 people were celebrating a perfect evening. He typed, "Wait for my signal." Then he walked to the desk and picked up the glass. The study door opened. Victoria entered, closing it behind her with a soft click. She leaned against the door, watching him with an expression that was almost sad. "It didn't have to be like this," she said quietly. "No?" Ethan held the glass but didn't drink. "How did it have to be?" "You could have loved me. Really loved me. Not just went through the motions." Her voice was soft but cold. 8 years, Ethan. 8 years of being married to a man who cared more about his empire than his wife, who spent more time with criminals and cops than with me, who looked at me like I was just another asset to manage. So you decided to kill me. Her eyes widened. You know. I know everything. The affair with Lucas, the insurance policy, the poison, the plan to liquidate my business and disappear. Ethan set the glass down, untouched. I've known for 2 weeks. Victoria's face cycled through shock, fear, then settled on something harder. Her hand went to her purse, came out with a small gun, a .22, barely bigger than her palm but deadly at this range. Then you're stupider than I thought coming in here alone. She raised the gun, steady and sure. This actually works better. A struggle, a shot, self-defense. I tried to stop you from drinking poison meant for one of the guests. You attacked me. I had no choice. You're going to shoot me with 200 witnesses in the house? I'm going to shoot an intruder who broke into my study during the party. By the time anyone gets here, you'll be dead and I'll be the traumatized wife who tried to save you. Victoria's smile was sharp and terrible. You taught me well, Ethan. Always have a backup plan. The door burst open. Wheeler came through first, gun drawn, followed by 3 FBI agents. Victoria spun toward them, her own weapon coming up, but Wheeler was faster. He fired once, the suppressed shot barely louder than a cough. Victoria's gun flew from her hand as the bullet caught her wrist. She screamed, clutching her arm, blood seeping between her fingers. FBI, don't move! Agent Chen entered last, her badge out, her voice carrying authority. Victoria Cole, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Victoria stared at them all, her face white with shock and pain. No, this isn't... It's over, Ethan said quietly. It's been over since the moment Amara told me what you were planning. Amara! Victoria laughed, high and breaking. That bitch! I should have killed her first. She's already in protective custody, along with her daughter, who you tried to use as leverage. They're both safe from you. More agents flooded into the study. Someone was wrapping Victoria's wrist, reading her rights, snapping handcuffs on her good hand. She fought them, screaming obscenities and threats, all her polish and grace stripped away to reveal the desperate, vicious woman underneath. Morrison appeared in the doorway. Lucas just tried to run. We got him at the back entrance. Moretti, too. He was an accessory, tried to help Lucas escape. They're all going down. The study was chaos now. Agents, police, medical personnel, everyone moving with purpose. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, watching his wife being dragged away, still screaming, watching his carefully constructed evening turn into a circus. Agent Chen approached him, her expression neutral, but something like respect in her eyes. You okay? No. Fair enough. She gestured to the glass of poisoned scotch, still sitting on the desk. We'll need that for evidence. Lab analysis, chain of custody, the whole process. Take it. Take everything. Ethan looked around the study, at the house beyond, at the party that had dissolved into confused murmuring as word spread of arrests and drama. I'm done with all of this. Outside the study, guests were being herded into the main room by uniformed officers. Ethan could hear Victoria still shouting from somewhere near the front entrance, her voice carrying through the house. Lucas was probably more quiet, more calculating even in defeat. That was his nature. Ethan made his way to the main room, where 200 people stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to anger to carefully neutral business calculation. They'd come for a party and gotten a crime scene instead. I apologize for the disruption, Ethan said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. As you've probably gathered, tonight didn't go as planned. What the hell is happening, Cole? This from one of his partners, a man named Stevens, who ran gambling operations in the northern districts. Why are there FBI agents arresting your wife? Because she tried to kill me, with help from my cousin. Ethan gestured to the agents moving through the room, taking statements, gathering evidence. They planned it for weeks, set up insurance fraud, conspiracy with organized crime elements. It's all documented. It's all over. The room erupted in overlapping conversations, people trying to process what they'd just heard. Marco Moretti was being led out in handcuffs, his face red with fury. His son Anthony was shouting about lawyers and lawsuits and false imprisonment, but most people just stared at Ethan, reassessing, recalculating, trying to figure out what this meant for their own positions and partnerships. For those wondering about business continuity, Ethan continued, operations continue as normal. My senior leadership remains intact. Any contracts or agreements we've made are still valid. This was a personal betrayal, not a business failure. And Lucas? Someone called out. He was handling the Eastern expansion. Lucas is going to federal prison for a very long time. Someone else will handle the Eastern territories. Ethan scanned the crowd, finding Maria standing near the back, cigarette already in hand despite the no-smoking policy. I'll be making announcements about new leadership structures after the holidays. More questions, more chaos, more people trying to understand how their evening had gone from celebration to catastrophe. Ethan fielded what he could, deflected the rest, and slowly the crowd began to thin as officers took statements and released guests. By midnight, the house was nearly empty. Just FBI personnel documenting everything. A few of Ethan's people helping coordinate, and the remnants of a perfect party scattered across every room. Abandoned drinks, cold food, flower arrangements that still looked beautiful in the stark light of investigation. Morrison found Ethan in the kitchen, sitting at the small table where staff usually ate meals. The detective looked tired but satisfied. Hell of a night, Morrison said, pulling up a chair. We got them all. Victoria, Lucas, Moretti, 3 other associates who were in on various parts of the scheme. Federal prosecutors are already drafting charges. This is going to be a career-making case for about 15 people. Happy to help. You should be. Without your cooperation, without that housemaid's evidence, we'd never have gotten this clean. Morrison leaned back, studying Ethan. You know what's funny? I've been trying to bring you down for years. Tonight, I helped save your life instead. Not sure how I feel about that. Join the club. What happens now? For you, I mean. You just exposed your wife and cousin as traitors in front of everyone who matters in your world. That's not the kind of thing that gets forgotten. Ethan shrugged. I showed everyone what happens when you betray me. That's worth more than reputation. That's fear, respect, and a warning all wrapped into one. Unless they decide you're weak, unable to control your own house, let them try. I'll still be here when they're gone. Morrison stood, preparing to leave. Cole? For what it's worth? I'm sorry. About your wife, your cousin, all of it. No one deserves that kind of betrayal. Everyone gets what they deserve eventually. After Morrison left, Ethan sat in the kitchen alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his evening. Footsteps approached. Agent Chen, looking as tired as everyone else. We're going to need you to come in for formal statements tomorrow. Depositions, evidence review, all the legal machinery. She paused. You did good tonight. Kept your head, played it exactly right. That's not easy when people you loved are trying to kill you. I didn't love her, not really. Maybe not, but you trusted her. That might be worse. Chen left, and more people filtered out, and slowly the house emptied until it was just Ethan and the echoing silence. He walked through rooms where hours ago people had been laughing and celebrating, where his wife had given her perfect speech and planned his perfect murder. The study still had police tape across the door. The glass of poisoned scotch was gone, bagged as evidence, but Ethan could still see it in his mind. Amber liquid, beautiful and deadly, the weapon of choice for his own execution. He ended up in the living room, standing by the windows that overlooked the snow-covered garden. Dawn was maybe an hour away, the sky starting to lighten from black to deep blue. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you. Elena is doing well. We're safe. I hope you find peace. A. Amara, safe in witness protection with her daughter, starting over somewhere far from here. She'd saved his life and lost her own in the process. Not death, but displacement. The permanent severing of everything familiar. At least she had Elena. At least she had someone to rebuild for. Ethan had nothing but an empire built on fear and a house full of betrayal. His phone rang. Sarah Chen, his lawyer, calling at 5 a.m. because that's what lawyers did during crises. I saw the news, she said without preamble. Tell me you're okay. Define okay. Alive. Not in custody. Not bleeding. Then I'm okay. Good. I'm coming over. We need to talk about damage control, media strategy, business continuity. This is going to be a circus, Ethan. Everyone's going to want a piece of this story. Let them have it. That's not how this works. You need to control the narrative before it controls you. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and a tablet full of news alerts. The story was already everywhere. Prominent crime boss's wife arrested for attempted murder, conspiracy exposed at holiday party, FBI swoops in at the last moment. The headlines practically wrote themselves. We're positioning you as the victim, Sarah said, scrolling through coverage. Tragic betrayal, brave stand against corruption, cooperation with law enforcement. It plays well. I don't care how it plays. You should, because everyone from the mayor to the FBI director to every two-bit criminal in the city is watching to see how you handle this. You show weakness now, you're done. You show strength, you survive. She was right, of course. In Ethan's world, perception was reality. He couldn't afford to look broken, even if that's exactly what he felt. They spent the next hour crafting statements, coordinating with the FBI's Public Affairs Office, reaching out to key partners to reassure them that business would continue as usual. It was mechanical, strategic, everything Ethan had spent his life being good at. But underneath it all, he felt hollow. The sun came up over the snow-covered city, pale and cold. Christmas Eve morning, and Ethan Cole was alive when he should have been dead, victorious when he should have been defeated, alone when he should have been surrounded by family. He thought about Victoria, sitting in a federal holding cell, her perfect life shattered. About Lucas, facing decades in prison for betraying blood. About Amara, somewhere safe with her daughter, starting over. About himself, standing in the ruins of everything he'd built. Sarah, he said quietly, what do people do when they lose everything? You didn't lose everything. Your business is intact. Your reputation is actually stronger. You've got leverage with law enforcement now. That's not what I meant. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. They rebuild, Ethan. They figure out what's actually worth having, and they build toward that instead of away from something else. And if there's nothing worth having, then they find something. Sarah closed her tablet. But first, you survive. You get through today, tomorrow, the trial, all the bullshit that's coming. Then you figure out what comes next. She left eventually, taking her strategies and her reassurances with her. The house staff began arriving, cleaning up from the party, restoring order to chaos. They moved quietly around Ethan, offering condolences and support, their loyalty to their employer unwavering despite everything. Or maybe they were just scared of losing their jobs. Hard to tell sometimes. Marcus appeared around noon, dressed in his usual driver's uniform, looking older than his years. "Sir, I heard. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. I'm starting to hate that word." "Where do you want to go? Hotel? Office?" "Nowhere. I'm staying here." "In the house? Where she—" "Yes." Ethan turned from the window. "This is my house. I bought it. I paid for it. I'm not letting her ghost chase me out. She gets a cell. I get everything else. That's how this works." Marcus nodded slowly. "As you wish, sir. I'll be outside if you need anything." The day passed in a strange blur of activity and emptiness. Ethan gave statements to FBI agents, reviewed documents with Sarah, took calls from business partners expressing support or concern or veiled threats wrapped in politeness. The machinery of his empire continued turning, indifferent to personal catastrophe. By evening, the house was clean again. All evidence of the party removed, all traces of the investigation packed away. It looked exactly as it had before: modern, expensive, empty. Ethan stood in his bedroom, the same room where Victoria had watched him nearly die a week ago, where she'd slept beside him for years while planning his murder. He should have felt something: rage, pain, betrayal. But there was just numbness, a cold void where emotion should have been. His phone buzzed. Wheeler. "Moretti's lawyer is making noise about entrapment. Won't stick, but wanted you to know." Ethan didn't respond. He just set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Christmas. The day after, Lucas would have been meeting with Marco Moretti to sell Ethan's Eastern operations. Instead, both of them would be in federal custody, their plans in ruins, their futures measured in prison sentences. Ethan had won, completely, decisively, publicly. So why did it feel like losing? Christmas morning arrived without fanfare. No decorations in the house, no tree, no presents under imaginary branches. Ethan had never been one for holidays anyway, but this year the absence felt heavier than usual. He woke early, showered, dressed in casual clothes that felt wrong somehow, like wearing a costume. The kitchen was empty when he went downstairs. No staff on Christmas Day. He'd given them all time off before everything went to hell. Before his wife tried to murder him in front of 200 witnesses. Before his entire life became evidence in a federal case. Coffee. He could make coffee. That was something normal people did on Christmas morning. He was measuring grounds when his phone rang. Morrison, because apparently detectives didn't take holidays either. "Merry Christmas," Morrison said, sounding tired. "Got some updates for you. It's 6 a.m. on Christmas. Crime doesn't take vacations, neither do prosecutors." The papers rustled on Morrison's end. "Victoria's lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea, 20 years instead of life. Chen's inclined to take it. And Lucas? Fighting it. Claims he was coerced by Victoria, that she manipulated him, that he never actually intended to go through with any of it." Morrison snorted. "His lawyer's arguing temporary insanity caused by emotional distress. It's bullshit, but they're gonna try." Ethan poured water into the coffee maker, watched it start to drip. "What about Moretti?" "That's more complicated. His lawyers are good, expensive. They're arguing he had no knowledge of the murder plot, that Lucas approached him about legitimate business acquisitions, that the FBI entrapped him." Morrison paused. "They might actually get him off on some charges. Not all, but some." "So he walks?" "He does time, just not as much as he should. That's how it works with guys like Moretti. They've got layers of protection, legal and otherwise." The coffee finished brewing. Ethan poured a cup, black, scalding hot. "When's the trial?" "Preliminary hearings start in 6 weeks. Actual trial probably won't be until next fall. You'll need to testify, obviously. Star witness in your own attempted murder. Media's going to have a field day." "Looking forward to it." "Yeah, I can hear the enthusiasm." Morrison cleared his throat. Look, Cole, I know we're not friends. I know you've spent your career operating in areas I'm supposed to shut down. But what happened to you was fucked up. Family betrayal it's different. It cuts deeper. Is there a point to this call besides your sympathy? The point is you've got leverage now. With the FBI, with the prosecutors, with everyone. You helped them take down a major organized crime figure and exposed fraud and conspiracy. They owe you. Use it wisely. Morrison hung up, and Ethan stood in his kitchen drinking coffee that tasted like ash, thinking about leverage and debt and the strange alliance he'd formed with law enforcement. 2 weeks ago, Morrison had been trying to build a case against him. Now they were coordinating on testimony schedules. The world was nothing but shifting sand, and trusting anything was foolish. He spent Christmas Day alone, which felt appropriate. Marcus had offered to stay, but Ethan had sent him home to his own family. Sarah had extended an invitation to dinner with her parents, which he'd declined. Maria had called twice, both times he'd let it go to voicemail. Instead, he walked through his house, room by room, seeing it differently now. The living room where Victoria had given her perfect speech. The study where she'd pulled a gun on him. The bedroom where she'd lain beside him for years while planning his death. Every space was contaminated with betrayal. By evening, Ethan found himself in his home gym, a converted garage space with equipment he rarely used. But tonight, he needed to hit something, needed to feel physical exhaustion override the mental kind. He wrapped his hands, faced the heavy bag, and started throwing punches. Left jab, right cross, hook, uppercut, over and over until his shoulders burned and sweat soaked his shirt and his knuckles ached even through the wraps. The bag swung on its chain, taking every ounce of rage and hurt and confusion he couldn't process any other way. He was midway through a combination when he heard footsteps behind him. That bag do something to offend you. Ethan turned to find Amara standing in the doorway, wrapped in a heavy coat, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. She looked different out of her housemaid uniform. Younger, maybe, or just less burdened. But her eyes still carried that weight, that knowledge of darkness. "You're supposed to be in protective custody," Ethan said, breathing hard. "I am. FBI safe house about 40 miles from here. But it's Christmas, and I needed to say thank you in person." She stepped into the gym, looking around at the equipment and exposed brick. "Nice setup. You actually use it, or just for show?" "Tonight I'm using it." He unwrapped his hands, wincing as circulation returned to his knuckles. "How's Elena?" "Better. The treatment is working. Doctors say she's got a good chance now." Amar's voice cracked slightly. "Because of you. Because you kept your promise even when you didn't have to." "I always keep my promises." "Most people don't. Most people say whatever they need to say and then forget about it when it's convenient." She moved closer, studying his face. "You look like hell, Mr. Cole." "It's Ethan, and yeah, I feel like hell." "Because of her? Victoria?" "Because of all of it. Her, Lucas, the fact that I built my entire life on a foundation of trust that turned out to be sand." Ethan grabbed a towel, wiped sweat from his face. "I should have seen it coming. I'm supposed to be smart, supposed to read people." "No one sees betrayal coming when it's from someone they love. That's what makes it betrayal instead of just business." Amara sat on one of the weight benches, looking small in her oversized coat. "You want to know why I really helped you? You said it was for Elena's treatment. That was part of it, but mostly?" She met his eyes. "You reminded me of my late husband. Dangerous man, controlled man, everyone scared of him, but he was good to me, good to our daughter. When he died, people celebrated. They threw parties because the monster was gone. But I mourned because I knew the man behind the monster. I'm not sure there is a man behind my monster." "There is. I saw it when you asked about Elena, when you made sure we were protected before you went after your own justice. When you could have just killed Victoria and Lucas yourself but chose the law instead." Amara stood. "You're not as bad as you think you are, Ethan Cole. You're just hurt and angry and alone. That's not the same as being a monster." She left the same way she'd come, quiet and unexpected. Ethan stood there in his gym, surrounded by equipment designed to build strength, and felt weaker than he had in years. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a fog of depositions and meetings and business decisions that felt increasingly meaningless. Ethan restructured his operations, promoted trusted people into Lucas's positions, met with partners to reassure them that stability would continue despite the chaos. Everyone was very understanding. Everyone expressed sympathy and support. Everyone was also calculating how to benefit from his perceived vulnerability. That's how it worked. Show weakness and the sharks circled. Show strength and they backed off. There was no middle ground, no space for actual humanity in the world Ethan had built. New Year's Eve, Maria showed up at his house uninvited with a bottle of bourbon and a scowl. "Enough," she said, pushing past him into the foyer. "You've been hiding for a week. That stops now." "Mati, I'm not hiding. I'm processing." "You're wallowing. There's a difference." Maria headed straight for the kitchen, found glasses, poured 3 fingers of bourbon in each. "Drink. It's not poisoned, I promise." Ethan took the glass but didn't drink. "What do you want, Maria?" "I want to tell you a story. Sit down and shut up." He sat. Maria remained standing, glass in hand, cigarette appearing from somewhere despite his no-smoking policy. 23 years ago, my husband tried to kill me. Not for money, just because he wanted to be with his mistress, and I was inconvenient. He hired a man to stage a home invasion, make it look like random violence. Maria took a long drag on her cigarette. "I found out 3 days before it was supposed to happen. You want to know what I did? I assume you didn't call the cops. I called the man he hired, offered him double to kill my husband instead. He took the deal. My husband died in what looked like a random mugging 2 days later." She smiled, sharp and bitter. "I inherited everything. His business, his money, his reputation. Built an empire on the corpse of a man who tried to murder me. Why are you telling me this? Because you're sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, wondering if you can trust anyone, questioning everything. I'm telling you that's normal. That's what happens when someone you love tries to kill you. But you don't get to stay in that place. You either move forward or you die. Those are the only options." "I did move forward. I exposed them. I won." "You survived. That's not the same as winning." Maria sat down across from him, stubbing out her cigarette in an empty coffee cup. "Winning means taking everything they tried to destroy and making it stronger. Winning means not letting their betrayal define the rest of your life." "And how do I do that?" "However you want. Clean up your business, go legitimate, start fresh. Or stay dirty, get dirtier, become the monster everyone thinks you are. Or find some middle path that actually makes you happy for once in your miserable life." She raised her glass. "But whatever you choose it. Not because of what Victoria did or what Lucas did, because of what you want." They drank to that, bourbon burning all the way down. Maria stayed for another hour, telling stories from her own dark past, offering the kind of brutal honesty that only came from decades of survival in a world that ate the weak. After she left, Ethan sat in his kitchen with the rest of the bourbon and Maria's words echoing in his head. What did he want? He'd spent so long building empire, accumulating power, staying ahead of threats that he'd never actually asked himself that question. What did Ethan Cole want when stripped of everything else? He didn't know, and that was terrifying. January brought cold that settled into bones and wouldn't let go. Ethan threw himself into work with single-minded focus, restructuring operations, meeting with partners, slowly rebuilding the infrastructure that Lucas's betrayal had damaged. It was mechanical, strategic, everything he was good at. But at night, alone in his house, the emptiness crept back in. Morrison called in mid-January with news about the trial schedule. First hearing is February 15th. Victoria's taking the plea deal. 20 years, possibility of parole in 12. Lucas is still fighting, which means a full trial. You'll need to testify against both of them. Fine. You don't sound fine. What do you want me to say, Morrison? That I'm excited to get on a stand and detail how my wife and cousin tried to murder me? That I'm looking forward to seeing them in orange jumpsuits? No. I just want to make sure you're ready for this. Defense lawyers are going to come at you hard. They'll paint you as a criminal who deserved what happened. They'll dig into your business, your past, everything you've ever done. Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide that matters. Everyone's got something to hide, Cole. Question is whether yours will blow back on this case. The hearing itself was a media circus. Cameras outside the courthouse, reporters shouting questions, Ethan's face on every news channel. He arrived with Sarah and a security detail, pushed through the crowd without comment, and entered the building with his public mask firmly in place. Victoria was brought in through a side entrance. Ethan saw her briefly across the courtroom, thinner than before, her expensive hair now pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer clothes replaced with a prison jumpsuit. She looked diminished, smaller somehow, all her polish stripped away. Their eyes met for just a second. She looked away first. The hearing was procedural, boring, exactly what Sarah had warned him to expect. Lawyers arguing about evidence admissibility, judges making rulings on technical matters. Ethan sat through it all, watching the woman he'd married become a defendant, a criminal, a cautionary tale. He felt nothing, just that familiar emptiness. Lucas's hearing 2 weeks later was different. His cousin came in fighting, his lawyer aggressive and loud, arguing entrapment and coercion and diminished capacity. Lucas himself looked defiant, angry, nothing like the charming man who'd spent years at Ethan's side. When their eyes met, Lucas mouthed something. Ethan read his lips. "Fuck you." At least Lucas was honest in his hatred. That was something. The actual trial was scheduled for September, 8 months away. 8 months of waiting, of reliving betrayal through legal proceedings, of having his life dissected by lawyers and judges and juries. 8 months of being defined by what Victoria and Lucas had tried to do to him. Sarah tried to prepare him for it, running through questions defense attorneys might ask, helping him craft answers that were truthful without being damaging. But Ethan found it hard to focus on strategy when every session meant diving back into memories of betrayal. March brought the first signs of spring and a call from an unknown number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Cole? This is Amara." Her voice was quiet, careful. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. The FBI gave me your number in case I needed to reach you about the trial." "It's fine. Is everything okay? Is Elena is in remission, complete remission. The doctors say she's going to make it." Amar's voice broke with joy. "She's going to live, Mr. Cole. My daughter is going to live." Ethan felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built to keep the world out. That's incredible. I'm happy for you both." "It's because of you. The treatment you paid for it saved her life." "You saved mine first. We're even." "No." Amar's voice was firm now. "We're not even. You didn't have to help us. You could have just used my information and left us to figure it out ourselves. But you kept your word. In my experience, powerful men don't keep their word. They just take what they want and forget the people who helped them get it. I'm not that man." "I know. That's why I'm calling." She paused, and Ethan heard voices in the background, a child's laughter, bright and clear. "Elena wants to meet you. She knows you saved her life and she wants to say thank you. Would that be okay? I understand if it's too much, if you'd rather—" "I'd like that," Ethan said, surprising himself. "I'd like that very much." They arranged to meet at a park halfway between the city and the safe house where Amara and Elena were staying. It was neutral territory, public enough to be safe, private enough to talk. Ethan brought Marcus for security, but told him to stay in the car, to give them space. He saw them from across the park, Amara pushing a young girl on a swing, both of them bundled in winter coats, breath visible in the cold air. Elena was laughing, that pure sound of childhood joy that seemed impossible after everything they'd been through. Amara saw him approach and said something to Elena. The girl jumped off the swing and ran toward him, this 10-year-old child who'd been through chemo and fear and displacement, all because her mother had tried to save a dangerous man's life. "Are you Mr. Cole?" Elena asked, looking up at him with eyes exactly like her mother's. "I am. Thank you for helping my mom and for paying for my medicine." She said it seriously, like an adult making a formal statement. "Mom says you're a good man even though other people say you're scary." "Elena," Amara had caught up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "We talked about this." "It's fine," Ethan said, crouching down to Elena's level. "Other people are right. I am scary sometimes, but your mom is braver than me. She risked everything to do the right thing." "She's the bravest person I know," Elena said with absolute certainty. They walked through the park together, Amara and Elena and Ethan, this strange trio connected by poison and betrayal, and the unexpected kindness that had saved 2 lives. Elena talked constantly, telling stories about school and books she was reading and her plans for when she grew up. Normal childhood dreams, made possible by survival. Amara walked quietly beside them, and Ethan caught her watching him with that same unreadable expression she'd had that first night, calculating something, weighing options, seeing possibilities. "What?" he finally asked when Elena had run ahead to climb on playground equipment. "I was just thinking how different you look when you smile. Less like a crime boss, more like a person." "I haven't smiled much lately." "No, I imagine not." Amara watched her daughter play, her expression soft. "But you should. It looks good on you." They stayed at the park for an hour, and for that hour Ethan felt almost normal. Not the feared crime boss, not the betrayed husband, not the man testifying against his own family. Just someone spending time with people who knew the worst of him and still chose his company. Driving back to the city, Marcus asked quietly, "You doing okay, sir?" "Yeah," Ethan said, watching the city appear in the distance, all those lights and buildings and people. "Yeah, I think maybe I am." The trial preparation intensified as spring turned to summer. More depositions, more strategy sessions, more diving into the worst moments of his life and analyzing them from every angle. Sarah was relentless, preparing him for every possible attack, every way defense lawyers might try to discredit him. "They're going to paint you as a criminal," she said during one particularly brutal session. "They're going to argue that Victoria and Lucas were justified in fearing you, in protecting themselves from you. You need to be ready for that." "I'm a criminal, Sarah. We both know that." "You're a businessman who operates in gray areas. That's different. And more importantly, that's not what this trial is about. This is about conspiracy to commit murder. Your past doesn't justify their actions." "Tell that to a jury." "That's my job. Your job is to be sympathetic, relatable, human. Show them the man behind the reputation." "But what if there was no man behind the reputation? What if Ethan Cole was nothing but the reputation itself? A construct built from violence and fear and the systematic elimination of anything that resembled vulnerability?" He voiced this concern to Maria during one of her unannounced visits. She'd shown up with Chinese takeout and bad news about a shipping contract, stayed to drink his bourbon and smoke his cigarettes. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," Maria said flatly. "You think you're some kind of empty shell? You think there's nothing real about you?" "I think I've spent so long being what everyone needed me to be that I forgot what I actually am." "Then figure it out. You've got time. Trial's not until September." She pointed her cigarette at him like a weapon. "But here's something to consider. That housemaid and her kid, they see something in you worth respecting. Morrison sees something worth working with. Hell, even I see something worth saving. Maybe trust us instead of your own damaged perception." "When did you become a therapist?" "When you became an idiot who needs one." But she smiled, taking the edge off. "You survived betrayal, Ethan. Most people don't. They either die or they become the betrayal, spreading it like a disease. You're doing neither. That says something about who you really are." Summer brought heat that made the city shimmer and press conferences where prosecutors outlined their case against Victoria and Lucas. The media coverage was relentless, every detail of the attempted murder dissected, every aspect of Ethan's business questioned, every relationship he'd ever had examined for signs of dysfunction. His face was everywhere. His name was synonymous with scandal. And through it all, Ethan kept working, kept building, kept moving forward because standing still meant drowning in everything he was trying to outrun. He met with Amara twice more before the trial, both times at that same park. Elena was getting stronger, healthier, her hair growing back from the chemo. She showed him drawings she'd made, told him about books she was reading, treated him like a normal person instead of a criminal or a victim or a news story. It was the most honest interaction Ethan had with anyone. "The FBI says we can come out of protection after the trial," Amara mentioned during their last meeting in August. "They've assessed the threat level, and with Victoria and Lucas in custody, they don't think we're in danger anymore." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere Elena can go to good schools, and I can find work that doesn't involve rich people trying to murder each other." She smiled slightly. "Maybe somewhere warm. I'm tired of winter. I could help, set you up somewhere, make sure you're financially stable." "You've already done enough." "It's not enough. Not for what you did. Not for what you risked." Ethan watched Elena playing on the swings, carefree and alive. "Let me help. Please." Amara studied him for a long moment. "Okay, but not because I need it, because I think you need to do something good after so much bad." She was right. He did need that. September arrived with the weight of inevitability. The trial started on a Monday, the courthouse surrounded by media and protesters and people who'd made Ethan Cole's attempted murder their entertainment. He walked through it all with Sarah at his side, Marcus clearing a path, his public face revealing nothing. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Spectators, journalists, law students taking notes. And at the defense table, Victoria and Lucas sitting separated by their respective legal teams, not looking at each other or at Ethan. 8 months since the party. 8 months of preparation and depositions and reliving betrayal. Now it all came down to this: a jury, a judge, and the truth laid bare for strangers to judge. The prosecutor's opening statement was clinical, factual. She outlined the conspiracy in careful detail: the affair, the insurance fraud, the poison, the planned murder at a party with 200 witnesses. She presented Amara's testimony, the recordings, the financial records, all of it building a case that felt overwhelming and irrefutable. Then the defense attorney stood up. Victoria's lawyer went first, a silver-haired woman named Diane Chen, who specialized in defending the indefensible. She painted a picture of Victoria as a victim herself, trapped in a marriage to a violent criminal, fearing for her life, desperate to escape. She suggested the affair with Lucas was emotional refuge from abuse. She implied the murder plot was fantasy, talk that was never meant to become action. It was masterful misdirection, and Ethan watched the jury absorb it, saw doubt creep into some of their faces. Lucas's attorney was younger, aggressive, a man named Richard Torres, who'd built his reputation on getting mobsters acquitted. He argued Lucas was manipulated by Victoria, seduced into a scheme he didn't fully understand, coerced by threats and promises into participating in something he would never have conceived on his own. He painted Lucas as a victim of Victoria's manipulation. Both defense strategies had the same goal: make Ethan Cole the real villain, make the jury believe he'd earned his attempted murder. When court recessed for the day, Sarah gripped Ethan's arm. "They're good, better than I expected. We need you to be perfect when you testify." "I will be. I mean it, Ethan. Show them humanity, show them vulnerability, give them someone to sympathize with." But how could he show humanity when he wasn't sure he had any left? The second day of trial brought Amara to the stand. Ethan watched from his seat as she entered the courtroom wearing a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back, no jewelry, nothing to distract from the story she was about to tell. She looked small in the witness box, fragile even, but when she raised her right hand to take the oath, her voice was steady. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Janet Reeves, approached with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Petrov, can you tell the court how you came to work for the defendant, Victoria Cole?" "I was hired 3 years ago as a housemaid. Mrs. Cole found me through an agency. I needed the work because my daughter was sick and medical bills were mounting." "And what was your relationship with the defendants?" "Professional at first. I cleaned, I cooked sometimes, I maintained the household. Mr. Cole was barely there, always working. Mrs. Cole was demanding, but fair." Amar's hands were folded in her lap, composed. "That changed about 6 months ago." "How did it change?" "Mrs. Cole started confiding in me. About her marriage, about feeling trapped, about Lucas Russo." Amara glanced at Lucas briefly. "She told me they were in love, that Mr. Cole was dangerous, that she needed to escape but couldn't, not without money." The prosecutor walked Amara through the entire conspiracy. How Victoria had first mentioned the insurance policy, how the conversations had gradually shifted from escape fantasy to actual murder plot, how the offer of $50,000 had been presented with Elena's medical needs as leverage. "And why didn't you go to the police immediately?" Reeves asked. "Because I didn't think they'd believe me. A housemaid accusing a wealthy woman of planning murder? I had no proof, and I was scared. Mrs. Cole knew people, dangerous people. She said if I told anyone, my daughter would suffer." "So what did you do?" "I started recording everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every text message. I documented it all because I knew eventually Mr. Cole's life would depend on having evidence no one could deny." Amara's voice cracked slightly. "And because I knew if I didn't help him, I'd be responsible for his death. I couldn't live with that." Victoria's attorney, Diane Chen, stood for cross-examination. Miss Petrov, isn't it true that you're receiving substantial financial compensation for your testimony? Mr. Cole is paying for my daughter's medical treatment. He promised that before I agreed to help him. So you had a financial incentive to fabricate this story? No. I had a financial incentive to tell the truth. There's a difference. You claim you recorded conversations with my client. How did you manage that without her knowledge? I put my phone in my apron pocket. I positioned it near where we talked. Mrs. Cole trusted me, so she didn't think to check for recording devices. That seems remarkably sophisticated for a housemaid. Amara's expression hardened. I was a military intelligence officer in Romania before I came to America. I know how to gather evidence. I know how to protect myself. And I knew how to document a murder conspiracy when I saw one. That revelation sent murmurs through the courtroom. Chen tried to recover, attacking Amara's credibility from different angles, but the damage was done. The jury had seen a woman who was smarter and more capable than anyone had given her credit for. A woman who'd risked everything to save a man's life. When Amara was finally dismissed, she walked past Ethan on her way out. Their eyes met for just a second, and she gave him the smallest nod. You'll be fine. Just tell the truth. But the truth was complicated. Lucas's attorney Torres called his first witness that afternoon, a former associate of Ethan's named Danny Marks, who'd been arrested 2 years ago on weapons charges and was clearly testifying in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mr. Marks, can you describe your working relationship with Ethan Cole? I ran security for some of his operations, shipping mostly, making sure products got where they needed to go. And what kind of products? Whatever needed moving. Sometimes legitimate stuff. Sometimes not so legitimate. Marks wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes. Drugs occasionally, stolen goods, whatever paid. Did Mr. Cole ever threaten you? All the time. That's how he operates. You do what he says or bad things happen. I saw guys get hurt for screwing up. I saw guys disappear for stealing from him. Torres let that hang in the air. So would you say Lucas Russo had reason to fear Ethan Cole? Everybody had reason to fear Ethan Cole. The prosecution objected, the judge sustained it, but the impression was planted. Ethan Cole was dangerous, violent, someone people feared, someone who maybe deserved what Victoria and Lucas had tried to do to him. Sarah leaned close and whispered, "We'll repair this on redirect, don't worry." But Ethan was worried, not about the trial outcome. The evidence was too strong, the conspiracy too documented, but about what this process was revealing about himself. Every witness for the defense painted him darker, more violent, more ruthless. And the terrible part was, they weren't entirely wrong. He had threatened people. He had hurt people who crossed him. He'd built his empire on fear and intimidation and the systematic destruction of anyone who got in his way. Maybe he had earned this betrayal after all. The trial continued for 3 more days before the prosecution called Ethan to the stand. He walked up there with his public mask in place, aware of every camera, every reporter, every jury member watching him. Sarah had prepared him for this moment, had coached him on tone and body language and how to present himself. "Be human," she'd said. "Show them you're more than the reputation." Janet Reeves approached with a professional smile. "Mr. Cole, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, Victoria Cole?" "We met 9 years ago at a charity function. We dated for a year, got married 8 years ago. At first it was good. We had things in common, enjoyed each other's company, but over time we grew apart. I was working too much. She was unhappy. We stopped communicating. When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Ethan detailed that December night, coming home early, hearing laughter from his bedroom, meeting Amara in the hallway. He described the recordings, the evidence, the careful planning of Victoria and Lucas's conspiracy. He kept his voice even, factual, letting the story speak for itself. "How did it feel, learning your wife and cousin were planning to murder you? Like everything I'd built my life on was a lie, like I'd been blind to what was right in front of me." Ethan paused, gathering words. "I trusted them. In my world, trust is rare and valuable. They took that trust and weaponized it against me." "What did you do with that information?" "I went to the police. I cooperated with the FBI. I provided evidence, wore a wire, did everything law enforcement asked me to do." He looked at the jury. "I could have handled this differently. In my line of work, there are ways to solve problems that don't involve courts and lawyers. But I chose the legal path because I wanted justice, not revenge. Reeves walked him through the party night, the poisoned drink, Victoria pulling a gun, the FBI arrests. Ethan answered every question honestly, holding nothing back. Then Diane Chen stood for cross-examination. Mr. Cole, you've painted yourself as a victim here. But isn't it true that you've been investigated multiple times for criminal activity? Investigated, yes. Charged, no. Isn't it true that you associate with known criminals? I associate with many people. Some of them have criminal records. That doesn't make me responsible for their actions. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct. You're a crime boss, aren't you? You run illegal operations, you intimidate people, you've hurt people who crossed you. My client was terrified of you. She believed that if she tried to divorce you, you'd kill her. Wasn't she justified in protecting herself? Ethan met Chen's eyes. If Victoria wanted a divorce, I would have given her one. I would have given her money, property, whatever she wanted. She never asked because that's not what she wanted. She wanted me dead, and she wanted all my money. There's a difference between self-defense and murder for profit. But you can't deny you're a dangerous man. I'm a man who operates in a dangerous world. That doesn't give anyone the right to poison me. Chen tried several more angles, attacking his credibility, his business practices, his relationships. But Sarah had prepared him well, and Ethan deflected each attack with calm precision. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, he felt exhausted but steady. The trial lasted 2 more weeks. More witnesses, more evidence, more lawyers arguing over technical details that seemed meaningless compared to the fundamental truth. Victoria and Lucas had tried to kill him, and Amara's recordings proved it beyond any reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Ethan spent that time in his house, alone with his thoughts, trying to imagine what life looked like on the other side of this. Would conviction bring closure? Would seeing Victoria and Lucas sentenced to prison heal something broken inside him? He doubted it. Revenge and justice might satisfy something, but they wouldn't rebuild trust or fill the emptiness. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Jury's reached a verdict, Sarah said. We need to be at the courthouse in an hour. The courtroom was packed again, every seat filled, cameras positioned for the moment. Ethan sat at the prosecution table, watching as Victoria and Lucas were brought in, both of them looking worn down by weeks of trial, their expensive clothes and perfect appearances stripped away to reveal desperate people facing consequences. The jury filed in, none of them looking at the defendants. That was a good sign, Sarah had told him. When juries convict, they can't look at the people they're condemning. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The forewoman stood, a middle-aged black woman who'd been taking careful notes throughout the trial. In the case of the United States versus Victoria Cole, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Victoria's face crumpled. Her attorney put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off, staring at the jury with disbelief and rage. In the case of the United States versus Lucas Russo, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Lucas stood, started to say something, but his attorney pulled him back down. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters rushing out to file stories, spectators reacting, lawyers already planning appeals. Ethan just sat there, feeling nothing. Guilty verdicts on all counts. Victoria and Lucas would go to prison for decades, their lives destroyed, their carefully planned future erased. He'd won completely, decisively. So why did he feel so empty? Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Judith Martinez, reviewed the evidence, considered the defense pleas for leniency, and delivered her ruling. Victoria Cole, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. Lucas Russo, you are sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for 20 years. Victoria sobbed openly. Lucas just stared straight ahead, his face blank. This court finds that your actions were calculated, cruel, and motivated entirely by greed, Judge Martinez continued. You betrayed family bonds, you attempted to profit from murder, and you showed no remorse throughout these proceedings. These sentences reflect the severity of your crimes and serve as a warning that justice will be served regardless of wealth or connection. She banged her gavel, and it was over. Ethan walked out of the courthouse into autumn sunshine. Sarah at his side. Marcus clearing a path through the media scrum. Reporters shouted questions he didn't answer. Cameras flashed, and he didn't react. He just kept walking until he reached the car, until Marcus drove him away from the circus. "We won," Sarah said in the back seat. "Complete victory. They'll both die in prison." "Yeah. You don't sound happy." "I'm not unhappy. I'm just tired." Ethan looked out at the city passing by. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild. You move forward. You figure out what comes next." Sarah closed her briefcase. "You're free, Ethan. Really free. Victoria and Lucas can't hurt you anymore. The trial is over. The rest is up to you." But freedom felt like weightlessness, like falling through empty air with nothing to catch him. He spent the next month closing out business obligations and making decisions he'd been avoiding. Maria was right. He needed to choose what came next, not let it choose him. So he started making changes. First, he legitimized what operations he could. Restaurants, real estate, import companies, all the businesses that straddled the line between legal and illegal got cleaned up, brought fully into compliance, stripped of any connection to criminal enterprise. It cost money and power, but it bought peace. Second, he cut ties with partners who insisted on staying dirty. The Morettis, still dealing with their own legal troubles from the FBI raid, tried to maintain the relationship. Ethan told them no, burned that bridge completely, accepted the loss of revenue and influence. Third, he started divesting from the parts of his empire that required violence to maintain. Protection rackets, gambling operations, loan sharking, all the traditional crime boss activities that had built his reputation. He sold some, shut down others, walked away from the rest. His empire shrank. His income dropped. His reputation shifted from feared crime boss to semi-legitimate businessman with a shady past. And for the first time in years, Ethan slept through the night without nightmares. December arrived again, 1 year since the night that had changed everything. Ethan stood in his house looking at the same rooms where his wife had plotted his murder, where his cousin had betrayed blood, where a housemaid had saved his life. He should have felt haunted. Instead, he just felt ready to leave. "You're sure about this?" Marcus asked, helping load boxes into the moving truck. 20 years of loyal service, and the man had agreed to come with Ethan to wherever came next. "I'm sure. This house is full of ghosts. Time to find somewhere new." "Where are we going?" "You'll see." They drove south and west, leaving the city behind, following highways that led away from everything Ethan had built. He'd bought property 6 months ago, acting on instinct more than plan. A small estate outside a coastal town where nobody knew his name or reputation. Where he could be just Ethan Cole, not the crime boss, not the betrayed husband, just a man trying to figure out what living actually meant. The house was smaller than his old one, simpler, surrounded by trees instead of neighbors. It had space for an office, where Ethan could manage his remaining legitimate businesses remotely. It had a guest house where Marcus could live with his own privacy. It had quiet and distance and the possibility of starting over. Amara and Elena were waiting when they arrived, standing on the porch of the guest house that Ethan had offered them rent-free. Elena ran to meet him, this 12-year-old girl who'd beaten cancer and survived witness protection and still somehow maintained her bright optimism. "You really came," she said, hugging him. "Mom said you might change your mind. I keep my promises." Ethan looked at Amara, who was watching him with that familiar, unreadable expression. All of them. They'd talked about this arrangement for months. Amara and Elena living in the guest house, close enough to feel like community, but separate enough to maintain independence. Ethan helping with Elena's continued medical care and education. Amara working as his assistant, helping manage the legitimate businesses that remained, using her intelligence background to keep everything clean and legal. It wasn't romantic, wasn't some fairy tale ending where the crime boss and the housemaid fell in love. It was simpler and more complicated than that. Two people who'd survived trauma together, choosing to rebuild near each other because isolation was harder than connection. "The house looks good," Amara said, gesturing to the main building. "You picked well." "You helped me pick it." "I offered suggestions. You made the choice." She smiled slightly. "That's what you do now. You make choices instead of letting circumstances choose for you." Elena ran off to explore the property. Marcus followed to make sure she didn't get into trouble, and Ethan and Amara stood on the porch in comfortable silence. How does it feel? Amara asked finally. Being here, starting fresh? Strange. Good. Terrifying. Ethan watched the sun set through the trees. I spent my whole life building power and control. Now I'm walking away from most of it. I should feel like I'm losing. Instead, I just feel lighter. That's because power and control are heavy. They weigh you down, make you paranoid, turn you into someone you don't recognize. Amara leaned against the porch railing. Trust me, I know. I carried that weight for years before coming to America. It nearly destroyed me. What changed? Elena. Having something more important than power or revenge or proving I was strong. She gave me a reason to choose life over survival. Amara looked at him. Maybe you needed that too, a reason to choose something different. Maybe I did. They settled into routines over the following weeks. Ethan managed his businesses from the home office, working with Sarah remotely on legal matters, slowly transforming his remaining empire into something that wouldn't require looking over his shoulder constantly. The money was less, but cleaner. The power was diminished, but real. Marcus took to the quiet life easier than expected, spending his days maintaining the property and his evenings reading, finally relaxing after 2 decades of constant vigilance. He and Ethan had dinner together most nights, 2 men who'd survived the same world finding peace in silence and simple food. Elena thrived. She attended local schools, made friends, joined clubs, became a normal kid instead of a sick one or a protected witness. Watching her laugh and play and just be 12 years old was the best thing Ethan had done with his money. And Amara was constant. She managed Ethan's schedule, kept his businesses organized, offered counsel when he needed it, and silence when he didn't. They had coffee most mornings on the main house porch, discussing nothing important, just existing in each other's presence. It wasn't the life Ethan had imagined for himself, but it was good. 6 months into their new life, Maria visited. She arrived in a town car with her driver, dressed in her usual expensive clothes, cigarette already lit as she stepped out. "So this is where you ran off to," she said, looking around at the trees and quiet. "Very pastoral, very escaping the life. You planning to take up gardening next?" "Maybe. Haven't decided yet." Ethan hugged her, this woman who'd been his mentor and friend through everything. "Thanks for coming. Someone had to check if you'd lost your mind completely." But Maria was smiling, genuinely pleased to see him looking healthy and rested. "You look good, Ethan. Better than I've seen you in years." "I feel good, most days." They walked the property, Maria commenting on the setup, asking pointed questions about his business operations, making sure he hadn't completely abandoned everything he'd built. When she was satisfied he wasn't having a mental breakdown, she relaxed and just talked. "Victoria's appealing her sentence," Maria mentioned. "Claims judicial bias, ineffective counsel, the usual desperation moves. It won't work, but she's got nothing else to do with her time." "I don't care. I know, that's healthy." Maria lit another cigarette. "Lucas is different, though. He's not appealing, just serving his time, quiet, cooperative. Word is he's actually remorseful now that he's had time to think about what he did. Good for him. You ever think about forgiving them?" Ethan stopped walking. "Why would I do that?" "Not for them. For you. Carrying anger and betrayal around gets exhausting. Eventually you have to put it down or it crushes you." Maria studied him. "I forgave my husband eventually, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I'm not angry anymore. I just don't care. Is that the same as forgiveness?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's better. Indifference instead of investment." She gestured around the property. "This life you're building, it's good. Don't let ghosts from the old one haunt it." Maria stayed for 3 days, charming Elena, trading stories with Amara, drinking Ethan's bourbon and filling his house with her particular brand of rough affection. When she left, she hugged him hard. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "You could have let what they did destroy you. Instead, you chose something better. That takes courage. Or cowardice. I ran away. You walked away. There's a difference." Maria held his face in her hands. This woman who'd known him since he was 18 and angry and desperate. "You chose life over revenge. That's not cowardice, that's wisdom." After she left, Ethan stood on his porch watching the sunset, thinking about choices and courage and what it meant to actually live instead of just survive. 1 year became 2. The trial receded into memory, something that had happened to someone else. Ethan's businesses continued, smaller but stable, providing income without requiring the constant violence and intimidation that had defined his old life. He paid his taxes, followed the law, became the kind of boring businessman that nobody paid attention to. Elena turned 14, then 15, growing into a bright young woman with plans for college and a future that seemed limitless now that cancer was firmly in her rearview mirror. She called Ethan Uncle Ethan, despite no blood relation, treated him like family in ways that mattered more than genetics. Marcus retired officially, though he still handled property maintenance and security out of habit. He started dating a woman from town, a widow named Patricia who made him laugh and didn't care about his past. Watching Marcus find happiness felt like witnessing a miracle. And Amara, their relationship stayed complicated in the best way. Not romantic, but intimate. Not family, but chosen. Something undefined that worked because neither of them tried to force it into a category. They had dinner together 3 or 4 times a week. They took walks on the property and talked about everything and nothing. They existed in each other's lives without demands or expectations. One evening, 2 years into their new life, they sat on the porch watching Elena and some school friends play in the yard. The kids were laughing, carefree, utterly normal. "This is what you paid for," Amara said quietly. "When you helped us, when you kept your promises. This moment right here, my daughter, healthy and happy and having a childhood, that's what your money bought. Best investment I ever made." "Better than your empire?" "The empire was about power. This is about purpose. Power's empty. Purpose isn't." Ethan watched the kids play, feeling something settle in his chest. "You saved my life, Amara. Not just from Victoria's poison, from becoming something irredeemable." "No, you saved yourself. I just pointed you toward the door." She looked at him, her expression soft. "You chose to walk through it." "We both did. That makes it easier." They sat in comfortable silence as evening fell and the kids eventually went inside and the world settled into the quiet rhythm of a life well lived. 3 years after the trial, Ethan received a letter from Lucas. It came through Sarah, who'd verified it wasn't some kind of threat or manipulation before forwarding it. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages of cramped text that looked like it had been revised multiple times. Ethan almost threw it away unread. Then curiosity got the better of him. The letter started with an apology. Inadequate, insufficient, but seemingly genuine. Lucas detailed his regrets, his understanding of how badly he'd betrayed family and trust. He didn't make excuses or blame Victoria or ask for forgiveness. He just apologized. The second page was harder to read. Lucas explained how prison had given him time to understand what he'd thrown away, how he'd spent 3 years thinking about the choices that led to attempted murder, how greed and resentment and jealousy had poisoned him slowly until he'd become someone capable of plotting his cousin's death. The third page was the most honest. Lucas admitted he'd probably die in prison. 30 years was effectively a life sentence. He said he deserved it. He said if he could go back and change everything, he would. But time only moved forward and consequences were permanent. The letter ended with a single line. "I'm sorry for what I took from you, Ethan. I hope you found something better." Ethan read it twice, then set it aside. He didn't feel anger or satisfaction or any of the emotions he might have expected. Just a distant sadness for the relationship that could have been, for the cousin he'd thought he'd known, for the trust that had been broken beyond repair. He never wrote back. There was nothing to say. But he kept the letter, filed away with other documents from that part of his life. Not because he wanted to remember, but because forgetting felt dishonest. This was part of his story, part of what had shaped him into whoever he was becoming. 5 years after leaving his old life, Ethan stood in his house surrounded by people celebrating Elena's high school graduation. The girl who'd been dying of leukemia at 10 was now 18, healthy, brilliant, heading to college with a full scholarship to study medicine. She wanted to become an oncologist, wanted to save other kids the way she'd been saved. The party was small, just family, which now meant Amara and Marcus and Patricia, Sarah, who'd driven up from the city, Maria, who'd flown in specifically for this, and a handful of Elena's friends who treated Ethan like a slightly eccentric uncle rather than a former crime boss. "Speech!" Elena called out, grinning at him across the room. Uncle Ethan has to make a speech. Everyone turned to look at him expectantly. Ethan, who'd once commanded rooms full of dangerous men with a word, suddenly felt nervous in front of this small gathering of people he cared about. "I'm not good at speeches," he started, and everyone laughed because they'd heard him talk his way through negotiations and trials and difficult business situations. "But I'll try. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I'd been betrayed by everyone I trusted, my empire was crumbling, and I couldn't see a path forward that didn't end in more violence and pain." He looked at Amara, who was watching him with that same expression she'd worn the night she'd saved his life. "Then someone showed me there was another option, that I could choose justice over revenge, law over violence, building something new instead of destroying everything old. And slowly, with help from people who had no reason to care about me, I figured out what actually mattered." Elena was smiling, tears in her eyes. Marcus had his arm around Patricia. Maria was trying to hide that she was emotional and failing. Sarah just nodded, professional to the end, but pleased. "What matters is this," Ethan continued. "Family you choose, not family you're born into. Purpose over power. Creating something good instead of just preventing something bad. Watching someone you care about grow and thrive and become everything they're capable of being." He raised his glass. "So, here's to Elena. Brilliant, brave, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Congratulations, kid. You're going to change the world." They toasted, they celebrated, they spent the evening in the kind of joy that felt earned rather than given. And later, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Ethan and Amara sat on the porch like they'd done hundreds of times before. "That was a good speech," Amara said. "It was honest. That's different than good. Honest is better." She was quiet for a moment. "You know what I realized today? Watching Elena graduate, watching you with all these people who care about you, we made it. We survived the worst and came out the other side into something worth having." "Yeah, we did. I'm proud of us." Amara looked at him, and for once her expression was completely readable. Affection, respect, gratitude, and something deeper that neither of them needed to name. "For choosing this instead of letting what happened destroy us." "Me too." They sat in silence as night settled around them. Two people who'd saved each other's lives in more ways than one. Content in the knowledge that sometimes destruction cleared the path for a life actually worth living. Ethan Cole had lost his empire, his wife, his cousin, his old identity. And in exchange, he'd found something infinitely more valuable. A reason to be someone worth saving, a family worth keeping, and a future that looked like hope instead of just survival. It wasn't the ending he would have written for himself 5 years ago, but it was the one he'd earned, and that made it perfect enough. The stars came out above the property, distant and cold and beautiful. Somewhere in the city, Victoria and Lucas sat in prison cells, living with consequences. Somewhere else, Morrison and Chen were building new cases against new criminals. And here, in this quiet place, Ethan Cole had finally found peace, not because he'd won or lost, but because he'd chosen to stop fighting and start living. And that made all the difference.